The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Happy 2025, everybody. Welcome indeed to Hayes Reviews. This is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews, and over the holidays I've been turned into a red-eyed, green-skinned frog wearing a crown. Just kidding. That's a calendar that I got from my mum for Christmas. So that the theme of this year is frogs with crowns on for me, and I've got a different one to look at every single month. How cool is that? But yeah, it's 2025. Put my frog calendar on the floor. Welcome. If you're tuning in to the live show tonight, it's very wonderful to have you here indeed. We made it through 2024. We're on the cusp of 2025. We've got a whole year of possibility and potentiality ahead of us to improve ourselves, to improve our relationships, to do those things that we've always wanted to do that we've been putting off and procrastinating on. We have got that opportunity. It's incredible. The days are getting longer. We're heading into, slowly but surely, the good weather, the warmer, sunshine-filled months. And so it's a good time to be optimistic and be thinking ahead, to be making plans, and to be making those changes that you've been, that you should have done a while ago. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you. But it's good to have you all back. We've got Frank, Matteo, LJ, Elizabeth, and Jeanette over on YouTube. We've got Hasdak on Rumble as well. Good evening to you all. I hope you're all doing well. And to anyone who's tuning in on the replay, please remember that there will be a pinned comment below the video where you can use timestamps to jump ahead to tonight's reading, which is, of course, continuing with the Milner-Fabian Conspiracy by Ioan Ratiu. What a book this is turning out to be. We're on chapter 6. I was looking at how many pages we have left in chapter 6, and I think it's going to be tonight and probably Tuesday's live stream as well to get this chapter done. It's a huge chapter, and it is, I think, one of the meatiest main parts of the book, because he's really charting a massive, basically 100 years of history in this book, because he's telling us about the Fabian society and its formation back in, when was it, 1884 they first met, I think. Sorry, 1984. No, 1884 they just met. 1984 was the Orwell novel, which was written about what the country might look like after 100 years of Fabian socialism, right? So 1884 is when the Fabian socialists met up, and they were doing their thing around the same time as Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner were looking to expand British imperialism and bring more of the world under the controlling, constraining yoke of Britain, because they deemed Britain to be the superior culture and therefore having a duty to these inferior cultures and peoples around the world, and we have to bring them the wonderful things that we have, such as umbrellas and bad teeth and, steak bakes, pasties. What else do we have here? I don't know what the other cool British stuff is that they wanted to spread around the world, but that's what they wanted to do. And to that end, they formed the Round Table movements, and they recruited a whole host of intellectual elites. I don't like using the word elite, but I think they like that, and they call themselves that. But they recruited and they groomed and they built out networks of people who had influence and power and prestige and did basically the same thing that the Fabian socialists did, permeating and penetrating political groups and academic institutions and even religious institutions to further enhance this plan of world government. That's what it's all leading towards. That's the name of the game. Don't let anyone tell you that it is a conspiracy theory. Do not let anyone poo-poo the idea that there is a world government being worked towards. I think the signs are there. They're very easy to spot if you care to put on your they live glasses and see things as they are rather than as you wish them to be or as you've been conditioned to view them via your government-sponsored indoctrination, otherwise known as schooling. But Ratiu in this book is really giving us a condensed, focused, distilled account of the past 100 years, building on the work of Carol Quigley and Rose Martin in their books Tragedy and Hope and Fabian Freeway, and because they were both published in 1966, Ratiu is bringing us up to pretty much up to the present day. This version we're reading from was a revised and updated version published in 2017. I would be very keen indeed to see what he had to say regarding the events of 2017 up to the present day. That would be good. But it's still fascinating reading. And we are currently working our way through, as I said, Chapter 6, which is all about the European Union, specifically how it is a scam, right? We all love YouTubers who come on and we say, and they debunk the scams and they find the scammers and the grifters and they call them out and they catch them out. We all love a bit of that. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be learning about how the EU is a scam. We've already read the Chapter 5, which was about the UN and how that's a scam. And now he's taking aim at the EU, and it's pretty riveting stuff. Lots of names, lots of well-researched information regarding the groups and agreements that were created in the run-up to the formation of the EU. He talks a lot about the movers and shakers, the politicians, the places they went, the meetings that they had, the lobbyist groups that were involved, the NGOs that came out of it, and how it's all a big plan to tie all humans on the face of the earth, apart from this tiny bureaucratic, parasitic class of people who are going to run things. The rest of us, we're all going to get tied into this digital system of control unless we wise up to it, start talking about it, teach each other about it, and do something about it, right? So I've got a bit of a preamble ramble for you tonight, and we're going to have a look at that in a minute. Just want to say hello to Gwen and Timmy as well, who got here, and thank you for reminding me it's world controllers. That's the phrase we got to use. We learned it from Aldous Huxley in his book Brave New World Revisited, which I should mention, I talked to Melissa of Cutting Through the Matrix about that very book, and that conversation is now live on her channel. So if you go to Alan Watt CTTM, you will find that on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute. You can go to cuttingthroughthematrix.com and you can listen to the audio. But I would recommend watching the video because for that video, we did something very special, very exciting, very unique, I think. I don't think I've seen any other channels do this anywhere else. We had dueling book cams. Yes, you heard that right. If you thought one book cam was cool, imagine two book cams face to face on the same video. Well, we did it. And I don't know if we were the first ones to ever do that, but we're the first ones that I've ever seen to do that. Here's a little preview of that now. I'll skip ahead. Here's me showing off my little book cam, talking about the contents of Brave New World Revisited by Aldous Huxley. And there's me still using my book cam. I'll find an example of where Melissa used hers. There she is. There's Melissa with her book cam. Copiously annotated book here with some annotations by Alan Watt in there as well. Lots of little tabs sticking out all over the place with various titles and subjects and topics and ideas. We had planned to go through the entire book on this video, but we only managed to get through half of it in 2 hours. That's how dense and amazing and important this book is. It's so filled with incredible quotes that give you an insight into what's going on, and also the mindset of the kind of people who are doing the thing itself, right? So we're going to get back together and we're going to finish the second half of the book, and that's going to get published, I don't know, sometime next week, I think. But yes, Dueling book cams, you've seen it here first. If anyone else copies it, then you can tell them, hey, you can't do that. That's Nick and Melissa's thing. But yeah, so you can go over to there, Alan Watt CTTM, and check that out. I think it was a pretty good talk. Just the quotes that we dug up and we shared are worth the price of admission, which is nothing, right? It's free. You can go there and check it out for free. So yeah, have a look at that. That's live on the channel now. And I think you will enjoy it very much. I enjoyed making it. I always enjoy talking to Melissa. I always learn a lot. And we've got our next book lined up. And that next book is announced in the video that I'm showing you on screen now. I won't tell you what it is again because you just have to go over there and check it out. All right. Lovely. So I hope you're all doing well tonight. And we are now going to get into our preamble ramble for this evening. So I wasn't quite sure what to do on the preamble ramble tonight. I thought maybe we'll look at the Wikipedia page for the European Union. And then it's really dense and long, and I didn't have time to give it a proper read to pick out the useful bits. So I scrapped that idea, and I went to the page in the book, and I thought, okay, I'll look ahead to see how much we have left in this chapter and figure out how much we might be able to read tonight. And when I realized that we weren't going to get the rest of the chapter done because there's still about 60 pages left in this chapter, I actually just refreshed myself of what we'd read previously. And I saw this bit here about how we learned that Ratiu was telling us about when it comes to historical evidence, that historical evidence that does not fit the dominant paradigm is ignored or suppressed, as illustrated by the Foreign Office, that's FO, Foreign Office, withholding of over 1 million historic documents in the breach of the Public Records Act. I was like, what? Okay, that's I'm incredulous. That's quite a bold claim that the Foreign Office would break the Public Records Act, because the Public Records Act exists to hold the government to account, to make sure they don't cheat the people and who live in the country. The public, this legislation is there to make sure they do things properly and are open and transparent, and we can see what they're up to, so we know that they are working for and in our best interests, right? So I was incredulous about this claim, and I thought I would look up the reference, and that's what we're going to use tonight to kick off our preamble ramble. The reference was a story from The Guardian, which was published on Friday the 18th, 2013. So it's a good 12 years old now, or 11 years old, as they say at the top of here. But indeed, this was reported in The Guardian, and it says, Foreign Office hoarding 1 million historic files in secret archive. The Justice Secretary signed authorization to place retention of files, some created in the 19th century, on legal footing for 12 months. And I think that means they've allowed to... So they've figured out that these files should be released according to the legislation governing this sort of thing. And then the Justice Secretary stepped in and he gave them 12 months to keep these files on retention legally. Because he can do that, because he's got special powers that the rest of us don't have. So what does the story say? Well, the Foreign Office has unlawfully hoarded more than 1 million files of historic documents that should have been declassified and handed over to the National Archives. Most of the papers are many decades old and document in fine detail British foreign relations throughout 2 world wars, the Cold War, withdrawal from empire, and entry into the common market. So that little bit there that I've highlighted in green pretty much describes what Carroll Quigley talks about in his books, Tragedy and Hope and Anglo-American Establishment. This period of time where we get books such as Doherty and McGregor's Hidden History, explaining the true origins and causes of the First World War. We've got also a short book by Nick Collerstrom, How Britain Initiated Both World Wars, which I'll just put on the screen for you there if you're aware of that one. That's available on Amazon. How Britain How Britain Initiated Both World Wars by Nick Kollerstrom, right? So they're covering something up. There's something going on in this time period that they do not want the public to be aware of, and they're willing to break their own legislation in order to keep it a secret. So carrying on with the article, it says these papers, these 1 million documents, have been kept from public view in breach of the Public Records Act, unless the department has received permission from the Lord's Chancellor to hold them for longer. So it's saying all government documents become public after 30 years, unless Lord Chancellor steps in and says, no, it's fine, you can hold them for longer, because he has the right to do that. No one else has the right to do that, but some human beings have more rights than others. Some are more equal than others, in other words. The secret archive is beyond the reach of the Freedom of Information Act as well. So isn't that convenient? The Foreign Office is not the only government department that has been unlawfully hoarding files, though. The Guardian disclosed also that the Ministry of Defence was holding 66,000 historic files unlawfully. So they don't even follow their own laws and legislation. That's a huge red flag. If you believe in democracy and you think we live in the best system that's ever been invented, and you're off putting your little X in a box every 4 years and thinking, yay, freedom, they don't even follow their own laws. Come on. But the article goes on to say that a basic inventory of the hidden archive gives a clue to its enormousness. Batches of files are catalogued according to the length of shelf space that they occupy. So this is a lot of documents. With 6 meters and 2 centimeters dedicated to files about Rhodesia. So that ties in to our book reading today, which is the Milner-Fabian conspiracy. Milner being the name of Lord Milner, Alfred Lord Milner, who was Cecil Rhodes' right-hand man. Cecil Rhodes is the man who gave his name to the place Rhodesia. So a whole 6 meters and 2 centimeters of documents about that place withheld. You're not allowed to look at it, and you're not allowed to know what's on those documents because you don't have the right. There's also 4 meters and 57 centimeters holding files about Guy Burgess and Donald McLean, who were KGB spies operating inside the Foreign Office and MIT. And I think that Guy Burgess and Donald McLean were part of the Cambridge spy ring, if I'm not mistaken. And I have a book on the shelf called The Fifth Man, which is all about the fifth man in the Cambridge spy ring. And the author of the book alleges that it was Lord Victor Rothschild. So perhaps there's some connection there as well that is hush-hush and not for public consumption. It's quite a detailed article. I won't bore you with all the details. It talks about the location of where these documents are held, and it's quite interesting, the description of the location itself. We are told that 2 wire fences, one 10-foot high and topped with razor wire, encircle the cluster of buildings. Between them is a no man's land with intruder alarms. CCTV cameras are positioned every few yards, and the entire perimeter is covered by floodlights. And then inside they have posters on the wall saying careless talk costs jobs. So this is real serious high security stuff, and the information in there is so top secret that it is got more security on it than probably our prisons. More security on it than I don't know, than a lot of things, because there's not a lot that's secure, and the crime levels in this day and age are sort of not going in the right direction, let's say. But they will not allow anyone to see what's in these documents. There was an interesting part as well, which it looks like I haven't highlighted, but how this the place where they're holding these documents. Oh yeah, here it is. I did highlight it. Hanslope Park. It's not only a high secure facility, it is also a place that appears to be accustomed to handling and destroying large amounts of paperwork, because it has offices that house row after row of typewriters rather than computers, and it has incinerators at the end of each room. And that's because they've got to dispose the typewriter ribbons, because that reduces the electromagnetic emissions, which can travel for hundreds of yards. Yeah. Not because you got to destroy documents, right? It's all, yeah. We need incinerators at the end of every room because of those typewriter ribbons. They need to be destroyed. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the question is, what happened? What happened to this little archive, this treasure trove of documents? Well, I haven't had chance, unfortunately, to follow up and find out if anything's been reported on it in the intervening 12 years. But it does say here, which is quite interesting, that declassifying this archive is going to be a mammoth task. It says that it's taken 2.5 years so far at this time, at the time the article was written, with the final tranche of documents due to arrive next month. He says, at that rate, clearing up the special collections would take around 340 years. So there you are. So it's at least it's been reported by The Guardian. So if you want to believe The Guardian, then you can believe this. It's up to you. I'm not sure The Guardian is such a reliable source, but maybe it was a little bit better 12, 11 years ago. But I can totally believe this story, because I do think that the government has a lot of secrets, a lot of skeletons in its closet, that if people were made aware of them, they might not be so trusting. They might not be so liable to go along with the diktats and the dictates that come our way from mummy and daddy government, right? So that's the first story I wanted to put on your radar for tonight's Preamble Ramble. But on the topic of European Union, which is the book's about tonight, so we already know that they're hoarding information, that the British government at least is hoarding all this information and wanting to keep it secret, and potentially destroying and sanitizing all that information before it can be released, before it can be trickled out via freedom of information requests, right? But the chapter that we're reading tonight is all about the European Union, the formation of it, why it's a scam, why maybe it was a good thing that we left, although have we really left? You know, that's the question, isn't it? What actually has changed? What actually have we benefited from? Hard to say. But one of the topics that has been going around and was in my Telegram group was this topic of digital identity. So I thought I would type in European Union digital ID and I would see what comes up. My browser is a Brave browser, you can see up here, and whenever I do a query like this in the search engine, it spits out a sort of AI answer, which I don't really like, but at least you do get underneath a list of the sources, and so you can follow up and find out where AI has produced this answer from. So that's quite handy. But apparently, and I wasn't aware that this was how far along it was, but the EU digital identity is really it's pretty much here. So there was a regulation enacted in 2024, which was the EIDAS 2.0 regulation, and it requires that every EU member state makes a digital identity wallet available to citizens who want one. And this is going to be a digital wallet that stores very important documents, including ID cards, birth certificates, and medical information. So it ties in nicely to the previous story, because what we're moving away from is hard copy physical documentation. Okay? And this ties into just the broader theme that we harp on about all the time on this channel, which is books, buy books, get books, read books, stock them up in your house, fill every available nook and cranny and storage space with books, because we are on a crazy trajectory into the world of digital everything, and digital identity is part of it, and the government scrambling and breaking its own laws and being hypocritical, secretive wankers in the way described by that Guardian article is down to the fact that physical documents are really, they kind of have a permanence to them. You know, they stick around. They constitute real world material proof and evidence of things. And if you are in the business of rewriting history, of controlling everybody's access to everything, then you want to be able to alter and change things willy-nilly at a moment's notice, and everything being digital allows you to do that. So if you think that a digital anything is going to be more secure than the physical, I think you are in for a shock when you find out that that's not the case. It still blows my mind that, for example, the British civil service uses Windows. It's like got to be the least secure operating system that exists on the face of the planet, right? And yet they're being told that they're serving the public and contributing to the nation's well-being and security, and yet all their laptops are using Windows. Like, okay, that's not the way it works, is it really? But the EU has a digital identity scheme, and it is well underway and well on the way. And even this little AI-generated blurb here tells us that according to the European Commission, by 2030, all citizens should have access to secure electronic identification that is recognized throughout the Union. Interesting to see that year 2030 pops up time and time again, doesn't it? Seems to be a lot riding on this year. It's going to be interesting to watch it roll about. We've got 5 years left. Let's see if it all happens according to plan by then. So I thought I would follow up with some of the sources underneath, and I would go to this web page here, which is the European Commission's webpage, see what they have to say about the European digital identity. They basically say the same thing as what we just learned in that little AI blurb there. It says every EU citizen and resident in the Union will be able to use a personal digital wallet. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, made this statement in the midst of the worst pandemic that the world has ever seen. She was chilling out and taking time to assure everybody that pretty soon you can rent a bicycle using your digital ID. And isn't that wonderful? Because we have no idea what happens to our data in reality, she says, and we have to trust all these websites and apps, and we don't know where our data is going, so let's just centralize all of the data collection and all of the data holding and all of the data gathering in one place. What could possibly go wrong, right, Ursula? But she made that announcement, as I said, 16th September 2020. So then there's a lot of blurb down here about the benefits and how wonderful it's going to be. And look at those happy guys with their sunglasses on, holding their phone, really chuffed, enjoying the sunshine and sharing their digital ID with each other. But it says, why is it needed? It says, digital identification systems offered by governments in the EU today have several important shortcomings. They're not available to the whole population. Okay, what is the whole population? Is that just anybody who's in the country? Because this, I've noticed the wording of some of the things on this website seems to include and apply to. It's just the number of people in the country, right? So it's like, regardless of whether you were born there, whether you have a passport already, if you rocked up there, if you just took a little boat and arrived on a beach, and just decided, okay, I live here now, then unfortunately the system offered by the government don't apply to you, and that's not fair. It's not equitable. It's not in the spirit of equality, and that needs to be addressed, right? So it's the whole population who needs to be included in this scheme. And what are the key principles? Well, it's available to any EU citizen, resident, or business in the EU who wants to use it. So what's a resident? As I said, it's just somebody who shows up on a little dinghy and says, okay, I live here now. Okay, maybe. It also says widely usable as a way of identification or to confirm certain personal attributes for the purpose of access to public and private digital services across the EU. So I'm going to show you an article in a minute that makes this point, but I'll make it here as well, is that access control is as much about keeping people out as it is about letting people in. Okay, so bear that in mind. Like when you put access control in place, you are segregating the people. You are separating the people. There's the people who use it and are okay with that system and go along with it, and the people who don't, they don't get to be involved, right? And then it says as well that it's going to be giving full control to users to choose which aspects of their identity data and certificates they share with third parties, which sounds pretty good, right? You get to choose and you're in control of your data. However, if you choose not to share it, then you don't get the thing that you want. You don't get the train ticket, and you don't get to buy the house. You don't get to rent the apartment. You don't get to apply for the job. You don't get to have your license to open a kebab shop or whatever it may be, right? So yes, you have full control over what you share, but if you choose not to share it, there will be punishments and penalties and restrictions imposed upon you, right? So you got to read between the lines of this sort of thing. And the practical use case, it all revolves around, or a lot of it revolves around money and banking. So filing your tax returns and opening a bank account are two of the use cases which are high up on the list. And then there's a use case here, which is applying for a bank loan. Oh, look at all these steps you used to have to go through. Set up a bank appointment, meet someone in person and talk to them. Oh, one of your paper documents is missing. You're going to have to go home and get that paper document and go all the way back to the bank. And then the bank's going to have to send you a proposal in the mail, and the mail takes so long to arrive. And then if the proposal's not right, you're going to have to send it back, and they'll have to send a new one, and you got to set up another, and on and on. Oh, what an arduous, boring, stressful, ridiculous process. Why don't we just simplify it and turn it all into an app where it is all online and digital and immediate and fast and convenient? Because it's all about convenience, making things nice and convenient for you, so you never do anything the hard way and you expect everything instantaneously, and you will not realize until it's too late that a life of convenience is no life at all. So have a look at that if that's something you are new to and not aware of, because they're pretty open about it. It's not conspiracy theory, it's just what is being done. I then went to the European Parliament, and they have this 1-minute video here about the EU digital identity. Here's a fellow here looking a bit confused, and he's having to open his wallet and leaf through the different things in the wallet. Oh, so inconvenient, isn't it? Look at him. He's like, oh, so embarrassed having to open his wallet and look inside it. Oh, but look at this happy girl. She's just scanning a QR code. So much easier, so much more convenient. Massive rooms of important people at the EU Parliament, and happy people using their digital scanning devices to access the things that they want to access. What could go wrong? Nothing, I'm sure. A little Saturn image there, if you know anything about your symbolism, what Saturn represents, and where that crops up time and time again throughout history. That's quite an interesting one to look into, but there it is, the Saturn imagery. What else have we got in this video? It's all about storing your identity, documents, driving license, etc. And this signing e-documents, right? This one blows my mind, and I'm amazed that it's even allowed to go on. But you can sign documents digitally. You don't have to use a pen and a paper. You don't have to use a signature that's unique to you. You can just squiggle your finger on a touchpad screen, and whatever shape that happens to make, and it's never a accurate signature, because like doing a signature with your fingertip and doing it holding a pen while your hand is resting on a surface and you're moving it across a piece of paper are totally different things. They're never going to look the same. But you can just, waggle a finger on a touchscreen and they'll accept that as some sort of signature. It just blows my mind that this is even allowed. And then in some cases, there's electronic documents, you just type your name into it and send it off, and that's some sort of legally binding document. Like it just beggars belief that that's been allowed. But of course it's been allowed to nudge people towards this digital system, right? That's the reason it's been allowed, not because it's safe or secure or has any benefit or advantage in terms of security. But what about my privacy? You will have full control of how and where your data is shared, and the person or organization or business that you're sharing it with will have full control over whether or not you get to transact with them based on what you decide to share. That's the part they don't mention. Scanning a little QR code, so convenient. The system will be inclusive and voluntary at first. At first it will be. Look, even that old guy with white hair can use it. So that's one little 1-minute clip. But what was even better was the comments underneath. Just a question, says this person. How many citizens voted for this? Vote no to this crap. The EP, so that's the channel, the European Parliament, has 113,000 subscribers. 55 like this subject. I bet those 55 likes are from people who work at the European Parliament. Nobody wants this ID. Nobody wants this wallet. Nobody wants to give his privacy over to the EU. Nobody wants to be controlled. Nobody wants to be denied service. Nobody wants to have limits on the way one pays. Who voted for these people making these decisions anyways? That gets to the heart of it, isn't it? Who voted for these people, indeed? So lots of fun to be had reviewing the comments underneath this video. Beast system, this one says. That's probably the best two-word summary you could get to explain this. So you can have fun reading those. EU is pushing digital ID. Now, the last and the final thing I have, but by no means least, for tonight's Preamble Ramble was shared in the Telegram chat by Frank. So thank you, Frank. You're on the YouTube chat tonight. Give him a thumbs up and a salute, because this was an excellent article that I had missed. But it's by the always fantastic Ian Davis. I'm a huge fan of him. I really like his books. His work is solid and very well researched, and he's worth supporting, that's for sure. I would very much encourage people to check out his Substack. And he's written this article, came out today, about why we must resist Eve's law and how to oppose it effectively. So what's Eve's law? Well, it's basically the European Union digital ID, but here in the UK, here in Britain, because we left the EU. So we have to do our own version of what they're doing because we left them, yet we're still doing the same thing that they're doing, but we left them. So it's a really good thing that we left them, yet we're still doing what they do over there. But don't ask too many questions or think about it too much, because your brain might explode if you have one. I think everyone watching this video probably does have one, though, because you recognize the importance of books, right? But this is a great article, and I'm just going to skim down to a few key quotes. It gives you a bit of background and explains to you that there was the alleged, he calls it the alleged Manchester Arena bombing, which was back in 2017 in May, and there's a gentleman who's done a lot of research and work into it and has a lot of questions about aspects of the official narrative that don't add up and don't slot in and make sense. No denial is taking place. It's just there's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of inconsistencies. There's a lot of contradictions in the facts as they are being presented. And the contradiction cannot exist in nature. Therefore, we need to iron out the contradictions to come to a proper understanding of reality and what actually happened. But for his trouble, for asking these questions, for pointing out these contradictions, this is the man, Richard D. Hall. He got put on trial, because that's what happens. The Guardian is supporting a law which would prevent people like Richard D. Hall from questioning events such as the Manchester bombing. And this is going to be known as Eve's Law. And it's going to be used to censor independent investigative journalists who question power. And then he goes on in the article to then talk about digital ID, because he's saying that this thing called Eve's Law, also known as Martin's Law, named after a survivor of the Manchester bomber. I think, is it the survivor of the Manchester bomber? Oh, no, sorry. The claimant in Richard D. Hall's trial is Martin Hibbert, and so they're using his name to describe the law. So that's why it's also being known as Martin's Law. Ian Davis says in this article that this law, Martin's Law, is accompanied by the UK government's push to roll out biometric digital ID via its trust framework. That is an Orwellian double-think concept, title, naming that I've ever heard. Sorry, concept, not concept. What's the word I'm looking for here? Label, I suppose. They've called it the trust framework, but obviously it's not about trust, is it? It's about trustless. It's about absolute transparency and visibility and zero privacy into our lives from a bunch of people who break their own laws when it comes to the access to documents that we should have as members of the British public, as described in that first Guardian article tonight. But this law is going to accompany the UK government's rollout of the biometrical digital ID. Ian Davis carries on. The state's allegedly robust digital ID system has been developed based upon its data protection impact assessment. Consequently, the state claims that subsequent biometric ID technologies, such as facial recognition and iris scanning entry systems, will protect the privacy of citizens. It's because they care about your privacy and they want you to be safe and secure as you are having your eyeball scanned to pay for a hot dog, or having your face recognized by AI algorithms when you walk into Asda. So Ian says, claims of improving access and protecting freedoms are hardwired into the sales pitch on biometric digital ID. However, inclusion will only be offered to compliant citizens. For everyone else, those of us vicariously identified as undesirable, biometric ID will deliver exclusion. That's what I was saying, right? Yes, you have control over who you share your information with, but if you choose not to share it, then you don't get to buy the bread. You don't get to buy the cinema ticket. You don't get to buy the train ticket. You don't get to rent the flat or buy the car or whatever it is that you might be trying to do, right? So bear that in mind. The UK government commitment to roll out biometric digital ID is commensurate with UN SDG 16.9, which UN, that's the Sustainable Development Goal 16.9, which promises to create systems that will hoover up the data from all interoperable digital ID products, such as biometric entry security systems, and store that data in a global, centrally controlled database. Yes. So that's what it's all about. Digital biometric ID will also be needed to onboard banking services through which we will access the planned digital monetary system. Yeah, so part of keeping actual physical real-world paper documents secure and safe from prying eyes, part of phasing out books, part of phasing out physical passports and physical driver's license is also phasing out physical money, right? The notes and the coins that we carry around in our wallets and our pockets, and we can use to transact for goods and services. They want to get rid of that. That's another part of it as well. That's going to be digitized. That's going to be sort of also it's another very important aspect of why they want to push us into this world of digital biometric everything. So he says, in addition, it's clearly proposed that we will need digital ID to use the internet. Yeah, so scanning your eyeball to get online. Every single, you are already track, traced, and databased everything you do online. Every mouse click, every swipe, every tag, entry, data entry, every keystroke, all tagged and logged and added into, I don't know, where probably the NSA or the GCHQ has got all that information. But what they're going to do is further consolidate that data mining of you by making you scan an eyeball or a fingerprint or a facial recognition or do something such as that to get online in the first place. And this will be to verify your identity, to keep you safe and protect your privacy. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? So continuing with the article, you simply hand over all your personal data to a global public-private partnership, and they will decide if you are who you say you are. Your digital identity, everything you do, everywhere you go, every purchase you make, every opinion you express online will be monitored, recorded, and analyzed by the global public-private partnership. If you step out of line, you can be punished by AI-controlled algorithms. Effectively, biometric digital ID will create a digital gulag. What's not to like? He says, using biometric digital ID will, of course, be entirely voluntary. You will be free to reject it as long as you don't need to work, pay bills, buy food, travel, or access your community's services in any way. You can be a social outcast and live life as a poverty-stricken homeless hermit if you want. It's your decision. The whole thing is voluntary. And that is the key point, the key takeaway. And that's where I'm going to leave it with this article. But as you can see, it is much longer and detailed, as are all of Ian Davis's excellent contributions to the work of independent research and journalism. I would encourage anybody to get over to his Substack. You can download his books for free by joining his mailing list. He's got an excellent one, which is called Pseudo Pandemic. I don't know where it is right now. I was going to grab it for you and show you it because it's got a really good cover. But it might be one of those books that's still in a box that I haven't managed to unpack yet. So there you are. So the government is keeping its own secrets and withholding its own documents and making sure you don't get to see them, making sure you don't get to look at them, while at the same time preventing you from having any secrets, any privacy of your own, right? Rules for thee and not for me. This is the actions of a cowardly, parasitic class of maniacal, control-addicted maniacs. So yeah, welcome to 2025. And that's how we're going to set the stage for our continuation with tonight's book reading. So I hope you all enjoyed that preamble ramble. I just saw we got Cyril's Way over on YouTube complimenting my jumper. Thank you very much. I like this one. I do like this brand, actually. This is one of my favorite brands. So cheers for that. Adam's asking for a link to the page. Ask and you shall receive, my friend. Right, I'll grab this link. I'm going to put it in the YouTube chat. Oh, it's quite a long link. Hopefully that comes through. I'll put it on Rumble as well. Boom. I'll put it on Odyssey as well. There you are. So that's the Ian Davis link. If you want any of the others, let me know. I can check them out too. Cool. So, and good evening, Adam. Good to have you here. And then I saw as well, we got ESP over on Odyssey, and Heidi and R. Murray 1 as well on Rumble. Good to see you all. So before we get into the reading tonight, just a reminder that if you want to support the stream and me and my work at any time, which basically means giving me money to buy more books, you can go to allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews, and you can find everything you need there to stay in contact, to send a donation if you so choose to do so. That would be lovely. You can see my email address, shoot me an email, stay in touch, join the mailing list. That's good, just in case we ever get nuked from YouTube, which is possible, because the numbers on YouTube are very strange. I seem to go up and down by 2 or 3 subscribers on a daily daily basis. It's very odd. I don't think we can quite trust the numbers on that platform. And then also at the top of this, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews, you can join my school community, which is now up and running and alive and happening, which I'll give you a little view into now. So this is a community. It's called Devised. On the inside, you can read posts that are mainly by me at this point, because it's just me informing people of what we're getting up to. But you can go to the classroom section, and you can have a look at these 2 courses. They're not really courses, but they're kind of educational resources, let's say. At the minute, we are holding a book club meetings twice a week, and we're reading through this book, 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television, and you can catch the replays here in the classroom. We've had one meeting last, what day was that meeting? Wednesday, and we're going to have the next one tomorrow night. And the whole point there is we just read a chapter and then we just have a discussion. Anyone who's on the call wants to contribute, wants to talk to me and share their insights and their experience. This is more of a round table exercise than the sort of me to you nature of the live stream. And then as well in the classroom, I've also started creating a section here for where I'm reviewing books. I'm on a mission to read a bunch of books about addiction and screen and technology addiction in particular. Here's the pile of books here. All right, that's what I'm starting with, and I've read 3 of them so far. I'm on the 4th now, and I did this book review of Trapped in the Web by A.N. Turner. It's an hour long, where I just read some of the quotes, give you some of the key concepts and ideas. That's also in the classroom, and there'll be more added to that very soon. And you can join the community for free right now. And then if you go to the calendar, that's where you can see the events, Tuesdays and Fridays, Hayes Reviews, that's what we're doing now. And then Wednesdays and Saturdays, we've got our Screenaholics Anonymous meetings where we just hang out. It's not recorded, it's not structured, it's just a place to get together, talk, get to know each other and discuss the topics. And then we have the book club straight after, where we record a chapter and have a discussion about it. It's a lot of fun. We've got a lot of interesting books lined up for discussion in the book club, and as time goes on and we add more videos to the classroom, it's going to be a pretty good resource. So if you are interested in that, if any of that sounds like it's appealing to you, then you can sign up now. It's free. It might not be free forever, just saying, right? So bear that in mind. Cool. So that is our preamble, ramble, introductory part of the broadcast. Hope you enjoyed that and hope that was useful. And yes, Happy New Year to everyone else. We've got a world of my own in the house on Rumble too. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for dropping by. I'm just going to move things around before we get over onto the book cam. And that is about where we are. So Heidi is saying over on Rumble, so much sense spoken here. Look out for the creepy controllers. We'll catch the replay. Thank you, Nick. Cool. Hasdak says, digital spy tools. A World of My Own says, foreign office holding files at Hanslope Park, which is also home to Her Majesty's Government Communications Centre, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Technical Security Department, and the site is adjacent to the Hanslope Manor House, a heritage building owned and run by Foreign Commonwealth Office as part of the park. Well. Ooh, I shudder to think what things go on inside that compound, right? We've got over on YouTube, Frank Lennon saying, digital ID for internet access. No more Nick reading, eh? Crikey, no way. We can't let this happen, can we? Well, Frank, they will not stop me reading. They just might stop me from broadcasting it to you fine people via YouTube. But I'll try and find a way, even if I can't broadcast live, to at least make recordings and put them up, maybe in a cuttingthroughthematrix.com style of website, minimal, and is always a nice way to go. And then Parallel Systems here as well, saying, great broadcast, Nick. Nice to see the channel growing. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate your work and your kind words. It's lovely indeed. LJ Bates says, no, we cannot, Frank. Agreeing, we can't let this happen. Well, I agree. Let's do what we can to raise awareness, to take steps in our own lives, in our circles and spheres of influence with the people we know, with our own behaviors, try and tilt things towards a better outcome. I think these sort of agendas are kind of unstoppable in the big picture, but in the small picture of our own personal individual lives, families, communities, then there is great potential for improving things. And that's really the area that we want to focus on. Yes, these agendas are out there and they're big and they're all encompassing and they're ambitious and they're kind of scary. It's a big juggernaut, kind of ready to trample everyone underfoot. But strong families, strong relationships, strong communities is how people can weather the storm, come out the other side of it. And so that's where we got to focus on our little area of influence and a little sphere of control that we do have, not on the areas that we cannot control or influence, right? So that's my advice. Cool. So the moment you've all been waiting for, time for the book cam. And here it is, the Milner-Fabian conspiracy. I'm just going to have a sip and move my microphone and get comfy. Alrighty. There's a section coming up in the reading tonight, which is linking Lionel Curtis to Winston Churchill. And I'm really excited for that chapter. I was going to do a preamble ramble on Winston Churchill as well, but his Wikipedia article is massive, and I didn't have time to read it properly to pick out all the interesting bits. But I did learn that he's from the Spencer family, so he's related to Princess Diana, which I didn't know. I don't know how I didn't know that, but I didn't know it. So I learned that tonight from Wikipedia. It's not a completely useless resource after all. But the first section we're going to be reading tonight is the EU and British Empire politics. To better understand the forces behind the European Union and their motives, it is necessary to take into consideration the wider historical background of the events under discussion. For good or for ill, British politics had long been dominated by a few landowning families. The Dukes of Northumberland and Sutherland, the Marquesses? I'm not sure about that. And what's the plural of Marquis? The Marquises of Salisbury and Earls of Derby, etc. With the advance of liberalism based on capitalism and internationalism, this plutocratic core allied itself with and was gradually replaced by the new capitalist money interests. By the late 1880s and early 1890s, private organizations like the Milner Group and the Fabian Society, representing international financial interests, began to infiltrate and take over the established framework aristocratic society. This situation is aptly illustrated by Cliveden, a former seat of the Duke of Sutherland, being bought up by the American billionaire William Waldorf Astor. The main group representing international financial interests, while being responsible for British Empire politics, apart from the all-permeating Fabian society, was the Milner Group, whose express objective was, quote, the extension of British rule throughout the world. And that quote is from Quigley, 1981, which 1981 would be the Anglo-American establishment. Page 33, Frank. The expansion of the British Empire was also Churchill's political aim in life. Needless to say, by British rule, both Churchill and the Milner Group really meant the rule of the money interests, which ran the empire from behind the scenes, and of which they were the representatives and collaborators. And just on the topic of money and the money interests, and because he popped into the chat, I want to recommend Parallel Systems Broadcast here on YouTube. It's on other platforms as well. Parallel Mike does an excellent job of educating and explaining to people money, the different kinds of money, the different flaws and benefits of the different systems in place, and the different options you have when it comes to how to protect and store and grow wealth. And I've learned a great deal from Parallel Mike and also his Telegram community, which I'm a member of. And so shout out to Parallel. And when it comes to topics of money, he's my go-to guy. So yeah, I would recommend him to anybody out there who wants to learn a little bit more. I think we could all do with more financial literacy, because that's one thing that always blows my mind. They don't teach you it in school. There's nothing on financial literacy in school. How to budget, how to spend wisely. They don't, they just let you blindly walk into debt, and they encourage everybody to do it like lemmings jumping off a cliff. But of course now I know why. But before I knew the sort of things that we've been learning about on this channel, it always struck me as bizarre that they just happen to leave that out of the curriculum in all our schools. Strange that, isn't it? But yeah, anyway, that's the money interests. Continuing. In addition, given that the world was a limited place, the expansion of British rule necessarily involved the suppression of other powers such as Germany, Austria, Russia, and Turkey. The Anglo-American Milner Eastern Establishment connection had a long history of deposing inconvenient regimes and installing its own puppets in China, Russia, and Mexico, etc. An interesting illustration of the nature of the interests involved is the case of Iran. In 1953, Eisenhower and Churchill, through MI6 and the CIA, staged a coup d'etat in Iran to put that country's oil resources under the control of the British-owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which later became BP. The reference for that is Mark Curtis' 2003 book. And remember, just a reminder as well that Mark Curtis is a Royal Institute for International Affairs research fellow, right? So Mark Curtis is not a independent historian, conspiracy theorist type character. Mark Curtis is like a Carroll Quigley. Carroll Quigley was the historian of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. Mark Curtis is like the historian of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Chatham House. So mainstream accepted voice analysis, and this is them in their own words, which is why I like to read the books that they write, because that's the best way to get an insight into these agendas and these schemes and these things that are going on. It's like, well, they tell you, they write books about it and just but they train you not to read at the same time. That's how they get away with it, right? So yeah, that's Mark Curtis. Keep an eye out for his books. They're affordable as well. They're not like exorbitantly priced and out of reach of the average person. You can get his paperbacks for like 10, 15, 20 pounds. Continuing. British machinations aiming to control Iranian oil went back to the early 1900s, and Iraq itself was created in 1921 under Colonel Secretary Winston Churchill. Again, as part of British imperial designs. These money interests aiming to control the world's resources and economies were responsible for the Boer War, World War I, the collapse of the Chinese, Russian, German, Austrian and Turkish empires, the rise of communist Russia, The Great Depression, the rise of European, not just German, nationalism as a reaction to these events, World War II, the Vietnam War, the Iraq War, etc. So that is quite a claim on page 259 there. But it's all about following the money. Where does the money come from? You can't wage a war unless you can pay the soldiers, right? So you got to have enough money to pay the soldiers and buy the weapons. And somebody has to, in the majority of cases, lend that money, right? The money's got to come from somewhere. So following the money and asking also who benefits is always a very critical thing to be doing when trying to understand these big historical events. So, Nemo Jones, you're asking for a link, but I'm not sure what to. So if you just pop it in the chat what you're asking a link, what you want a link for, then I can dig that up for you and get it to you. And thank you, Parallel Mike. I appreciate the kind words. All right. Gee, I haven't even got off the second page yet. I need to stop interrupting myself. In the light of the wider historical context, it becomes clear that none of the world wars was about German militarism or Nazism, but about control over natural resources, including oil, which were being steadily monopolized by Anglo-American interests. Arch-imperialist Lionel Curtis himself conceded that the world wars of the 20th century were a struggle between the haves and the have-nots, between satisfied and unsatisfied powers, between countries like the British and American Commonwealths, France, Belgium, the Netherlands and Russia on the one hand, and Germany, Italy and Japan on the other. So that's a quote from one of Lionel Curtis's books. I'm not sure which one. In other words, the struggle was admittedly between countries with and countries without colonies, i.e. natural resources. Curtis justified the existing inequality between powers by claiming that those like Britain controlled subject territories for the benefit of the people who lived in them, whereas those like Germany allegedly enslaved the natives like, quote, a Russian boyar in the last century. But it's difficult to see how British rule was of benefit to the millions of natives of Ireland, India, Egypt, or North America who became victims of exploitation, poverty, starvation, and mass extermination. Curtis must have been aware that Indian leaders like Mahatma Gandhi called British rule in India the kingdom of Satan, and that few fellow Indians cared to disagree. The fact is that Britain had become the world's dominant economic and military power thanks to its colonies, from which it extracted resources to feed its economy and fund its military. But while this was good for Britain's ruling elites, it was bad for others, whose access to resources was becoming more and more restricted. The only possible way for them to escape British domination was by acquiring colonies of their own. But wherever they turned, they stumbled upon British interests. In addition, it must be recalled that the Milner Group's objective was the extension of British rule throughout the world. In these circumstances, not only were others entitled to resist British domination, but they were forced to do so in order to survive as independent nations. It follows that the economic interests of certain British and international cliques were the true causes of conflict between Britain and other powers. True, military hostilities were started by Germany in both world wars. In World War I, Germany invaded Belgium as the shortest route in order to outflank the French army, which was an ally of Russia with whom Germany was at war. However, it is arguable that Russia had been the first to mobilize its forces, and there is compelling evidence showing that Britain and France had been building up Russia economically and militarily and fostered its appetite for expansion in the Balkans in the knowledge that a war between Russia and Germany would result in Anglo-French intervention in favor of Russia. Similarly, in World War II, Germany invaded Poland in order to attack Soviet Russia, which arguably had its own plans to invade both Poland and Germany. In terms of Anglo-German relations, however, the crucial point is that Germany's actions were not directed at Britain. Yet in both cases, Britain responded by declaring war on Germany. It follows that claims to the effect that Germany started the war against Britain are factually incorrect. The Anglo-German military conflict was the result of Britain's declaration of war against Germany. Britain's declaration of war against Germany was the continuation of the established British policy of containing Germany. And the British policy of containing Germany was motivated by British ambitions to rule the world. Indeed, in both wars, Germany's immediate interests were not in the West, but in the East. As Quigley points out, the Milner Group was not prepared to allow Germany to expand eastwards. The obvious reason was that Germany's eastward expansion conflicted with the Milner Group's Central European and Middle Eastern interests. To Britain's ruling elites, the Middle East and its oil, in particular, was and remained, quote, a vital prize for any power interested in world influence or domination. Indeed, these interests were in turn part of the Milner Group's global designs, hence the group's opposition to German influence in Africa, the Pacific, Latin America, and elsewhere. So this whole section here, and what he was just saying about Britain starting the war, reminds me quite a bit of the Hidden History book, Doherty and McGregor, which I have here. I reviewed this book on the channel. I didn't read it in full, but I did do an hour or so just talking about reading some of the quotes and explaining. Look, there's Milner. There he is in the bottom left there. Explaining some of the things I learned, because this book blew my mind. It really did. Hidden History, Jerry Doherty and Jim McGregor. That's about 20 quid, I think, on Amazon. And the wonderful thing about it is that when you get to the end of a chapter, there's like a bullet point list of all the key points. So you don't even have to read the whole book in full, right? You could just get the book, skip to the end of the chapter, and just read those key points. And that's a really great idea, really good way to write a book. But it's incredibly well researched, well referenced. There's loads and loads of footnotes, and that's a really good one to have. And you can see that blue tab there that I've put in. That's where the footnotes and references start. So it's a good, like, almost a quarter of the book is just footnotes and references, backing up the analysis. The appendix starts there. So that's a really good one, and that is a more in-depth exploration of what Ratiu is talking about on the page we just read. And Nemo wants a link for Parallel Systems. I think you can just go to YouTube and just type in Parallel Systems Broadcast or Parallel Mic. I think there is a website, but I don't know the URL off the top of my head. Mike might be able to stick that in the chat. If he's still here. Is it parallelsystems.com? I'm just going to try that. No, that didn't work. That's because I spelled systems wrong. Okay, I'll try this quickly. If this isn't it, then... No, that's definitely not it. That's something else totally. Cool. Let's carry on then. These designs are helpfully elucidated by leading Milnerite Harry Hodson himself, who, as former director of the Ministry of Information's Empire Division, was indisputably in a position to know the Empire's true motives. Writing in the aftermath of World War II, when most of Europe was safe under British Allied, i.e. Milner-Fabian communist occupation, Hodson makes no effort to bring up the old canard about Belgium and Poland. He gets straight to the point by admitting that the domination of Europe by any nation other than Britain itself had always been unacceptable to Britain. He then claims that while Germany could survive without world power, Britain needed not only an empire, but a world order. He next proceeds to explain by logical stages that since Britain's survival as a great power depended on the command of the North and South Atlantic, as well as of the Indian and South Pacific Oceans, it needed to dominate Gibraltar as a minimum strategic empire, as well as the Middle East, Africa, India, and South America, and had to have North America on its side. Britain, he concludes, needed to have an Eastern as well as an African and an Atlantic empire. In case this is not clear enough, Hodson provides an imperial map dividing the world into 7 theatres of power, all of which, with the apparent exception of the Soviet Union, or what he calls the central landmass, are to be under Anglo-American control. The obvious implication is that the world was to be ruled by Britain, America, and Russia under British leadership. Thus, the British Empire in the Atlantic, Indian Ocean, South Pacific, Africa, etc., that is pretty much everywhere, was to be the foundation for a system of world peace. Thanks to Quigley and other historians, we now know that this global empire served not only the interests of world peace, but also those of the international financiers ruling Britain and much of the world from behind the scenes. I'm just going to check up this link this reference for Hodson, Harry Hodson. So we'll just flick to the back of the chapter. You can see here there's loads left. But the footnotes are at the end with the bibliography after each chapter, so that's very handy. And they're in alphabetical order, which helps us find what we're looking for. So we're looking for H, Hodson, and we got here Henry. Right, so that's it. So we got Henry Hodson. It's a 1948 book called 20th Century Empire. And I think that would be a good one to add to the old library. Accordingly, already in 1936, let me go back as well to mention the system of world peace. So Hodson, in that book, 1948 book we just looked at, up in the bibliography, asserts that Britain is going to bring in a system of world peace, which just reminds me of that, like, enforcing peace. You know, the mantra, the motto. The goal of the UN is to force peace, to enforce peace around the world. It's just a ridiculous bit of Orwellian doublespeak. Okay, carrying on. Accordingly, already in 1936, the permanent Under-Secretary at the Foreign Office, Sir Robert Vansittart, said, "We shall have to fight to keep Germany out of the colonial sphere. Unless we are both careful and clever, we shall get these hostilities before we are ready." Officially, Britain was supposed to be appeasing Germany, but this was just a stratagem to win time for rearmament. Vansittart's statements clearly show that there were elements in the British hierarchy planning for war against Germany in 1936, that is, 3 years before Germany invaded Poland, and that this plan was not motivated by the desire to protect Poland, but by the imperial interests of the Anglo-American money power. Lionel Curtis writes that when Germany attacked Poland, the only states which drew the sword to prevent her were the British democracies and France. But Britain and France failed to draw the sword when shortly after, Germany, and in collaboration with it, Russia, invaded the eastern half of Poland, massacring the entire Polish leadership. Moreover, only a few years later, the same states, which drew the sword to save Poland, delivered Poland into the clutches of Stalin with well-known tragic consequences. The man personally responsible for this dishonourable betrayal was British arch-imperialist Churchill himself. As base metal allegedly turned into gold in the hands of medieval alchemists, what was wrong when conflicting the British imperial interests miraculously became right when serving the same interests. So that again just reminds us of this article we looked at the beginning of the stream tonight, where it's okay for the British establishment to withhold documents that they themselves said they would release after 30 years. But it's not okay for the rest of us to have any kind of privacy, be that digital or otherwise, in this day and age with total tracking, tracing, surveillance, databasing of everything we say, do, think, buy, etc., right? So it's that, again, double standard, rules for thee, not for me. Same thing was going on back then, same thing going on today. The same imperial double standards were at play when Britain advocated the federation of all English-speaking people in the world while fighting tooth and nail against the unification of German-speaking people in Europe. After all, Britain had also objected to Germany's annexation of German-speaking Austria, even though many Austrians welcomed it. According to Vansittart, Hitler's policy of uniting Central Europe's ethnic Germans living in Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, etc. was comprehensible, but quite incompatible with our interests. The above facts demand a closer examination of British motives and the interests behind them. As Britain had already been at war with Germany in 1914, the causes of the Anglo-German conflict can hardly be attributed to the Nazi government, which came to power nearly 2 decades later in 1933. They must go further back. Exactly how far back becomes apparent if we have a look at Britain's Boer Wars. The Second Boer War of 1899 to 1902 was a conflict instigated by the Milner Group against the Boers and revolved on control of gold and diamond mines. Milner Group founders Cecil Rhodes and Lord Rothschild, together with Alfred Beit and associates, controlled South Africa's diamond mines through their company De Beers and aimed to extend their monopoly to gold. So again, remember this article we read at the start about how they had, 6 meters of documents relating to Rhodesia that the Foreign Office was unwilling to release to the public and to make available via Freedom of Information requests. Could it have something to do with this, perhaps? Cecil Rhodes, diamond mines, South Africa, Lord Rothschild, maybe De Beers. Continuing. British suppression of the Boers drew criticism from Germany and other European countries. When Germany began to expand its fleet to protect its commercial interests, Britain used this as a pretext to start a naval competition with Germany. As admitted by General Smuts, World War I began during the Boer War when Germany decided to build its own fleet. From that moment, while consolidating its grip on Africa, the Middle East and other parts of the world, Britain sought to exclude Germany with the help of other powers like France, Russia, Japan, and America. Anti-German propaganda literature can be traced to 1895, when it was started by the British press led by Milner-controlled The Times newspaper. Before long, hundreds of invasion stories written, among others by H.G. Wells, Erskine Childers, Rudyard Kipling, John Buchan, and Sir Conan Doyle, were published and distributed all over Britain, whipping up unprecedented anti-German mass hysteria. In early 1906, the Daily Mail started a series describing a German invasion of Britain as a true story. And I have heard that before, actually. I can't remember where. It might have been in the Hidden History book where they talk about that. But it's similar to the Orson Welles radio dramatization of War of the Worlds, where people started to think it was a factual account of what was really going on, and they started to panic, and they started to be whipped up into a frenzy and get very alarmed and agitated by it, right? Other leading papers, controlled by the same elements, were enlisted to promote the same anti-German agenda. There were, of course, no German invasion plans. There was a legitimate German desire to be a world power like Britain, and this clashed with British insistence on being the only dominant power in the world. Needless to say, readers were unaware that they were being subjected to systematic black propaganda by vested interests, or that the writers churning out fabricated stories about German invaders and spies were no ordinary novelists, but often worked for MI6 and the British War Propaganda Bureau. The fact that the authors in question were active in the field of fiction should have given them some pause for thought. Conan Doyle, for example, was an incurable fantasist and self-styled expert on spiritualism, who later insisted that the obviously faked Cottingley fairy photographs were genuine even after their authors had confessed to their fraud. His friend and co-author Bertram Fletcher Robinson did warn the nation that Britain's political parties were increasingly resorting to misinformation, such as lies about the Boer War, to further their agendas. Unfortunately, once they had ingested the propaganda dished out by the Milner Group and its associates, British patriots were unswayed by such trifles as factual truth. Ain't that the truth? Some things never change. Had they followed the example of Doyle's Sherlock Holmes and done a little detective work or elementary thinking, they would soon have discovered which interests were behind the campaign. H.G. Wells was a member of the Fabian Society Executive and later of the Fabian Propaganda Committee. Kipling and Buchan were members of the Milner Group. Childers, Churchill's favourite author, had served in the Boer War with his companion Basil Williams, a Milner Group member and reporter for the Times. Conan Doyle, another close friend of Churchill, was a member of the exclusive Milner-associated Pilgrim Society. Moberly Bell, manager of the Times, was also a member. The Daily Mail story itself had been instigated by the paper's owner, Lord Northcliffe, in collaboration with Field Marshal Lord Roberts, a Boer War veteran and president of the Pilgrim Society. The Pilgrims was an organization established in 1902 by the same Anglo-American financial interests as those behind the Milner Group to foster closer links between Britain and America. At the Society's instigation, the sumptuous banquet halls of the Carlton, Claridge's, the Savoy and the Waldorf Astoria became places where Britain's old ruling elites were busy reorganizing the world with their new international business partners, John Jacob Astor of Morgan-controlled Astor National Bank and his relatives, Jacob Schiff of Kuhn, Loeb & Co., a long-time Rothschild representative, August Belmont of August Belmont & Co., a long-time Rothschild representative, J.P. Morgan of J.P. Morgan & Co., another Rothschild representative, and, from 1910, Vice President of the Pilgrims' U.S. branch, George W. Perkins of J.P. Morgan & Co., Charles A. Coffin of Morgan-controlled General Electric Company, James MacDonald of Rockefeller-controlled Standard Oil, and other members of the same international fraternity. The founder of both branches of the Pilgrims was New York lawyer Lindsay Russell, who clearly acted on behalf of these interests, later co-founding the CFR itself. So that's Lindsay Russell, New York lawyer who co-founded the CFR. Despite the Pilgrims ostensibly being an informal dining club, the involvement of Field Marshal Lord Roberts, Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, and his friend, U.S. General Joseph Wheeler, indicates that the Anglo-American friendship promoted by the Society included military cooperation. Indeed, it is clear that the military aspect of the friendship was high on the Society's agenda. In addition, Field Marshal Roberts was a leading figure in the National Service League, which campaigned for military training for the whole of Britain's population with a very specific aim: to free the regular professional army for overseas operations. Similarly, the Anglo-Japanese alliance of 1902 was designed to enable Britain to concentrate its forces in the West. What becomes clear from this is that elements of Britain's ruling elites representing international financial interests were promoting and preparing for a major war against Germany by the early 1900s. That is, years before anyone else could have told with any certainty whether war would actually break out. These interests were adept at long-term scheming, a tactic that enabled them to remain in the background and deny responsibility for events they themselves had set in motion long before. Nor had this war anything to do with self-defense, being part of the money interests' declared aim of extending their rule throughout the world. Anti-German jingoism had other fateful effects, apart from promoting the power trust's anti-German designs. It served to cover up the fact that the empire was being taken over by the international financial interests who had set up the Milner Group and associated organizations, such as the Anglo-American League and the Pilgrim Society, for that very purpose. The more the British populace allowed itself to be gripped by the German scare, the less likely it was to notice the Milner Group's takeover of the empire and the world. There was no doubt that with Germany removed from the scene, there would follow world organization on a global scale, complete with League of Nations, United Nations, and European Union. Unfortunately, the German scare ensured the British people's solidarity with the very clique who was cynically manipulating their patriotic sentiments for its own agenda. Another effect was that malicious propaganda was substituted for fact and became the basis for official British policy. British treaties with France and Russia in 1905 to 1907, which were called the Triple Entente, squarely ranged Britain against Germany, laying the foundations of all future British-German conflicts. And, excuse me, 1 second. The Hidden History book goes into great detail about this Triple Entente and how it was formed and the diplomats who were involved. It's an incredible piece of scholarship. As the Pilgrims had been set up by the Anglo-American establishment, and was described as an unofficial Anglo-Saxon parliament. The topics discussed under its roof must reflect the interests and intentions of its creators with some accuracy. At a Pilgrims' dinner in February 1903, Pilgrims member Vice Admiral Lord Charles Beresford pleaded for a larger US Navy. At another Pilgrims' dinner for the delegates to the Colonial Conference in April 1907, attended by Milnerite luminaries like Lord Esher and their protege Churchill, Australian Prime Minister Alfred Deakin declared that Britain would have to fight Germany and Japan, quote, for supremacy in the Pacific. Deakin was a leading Federalist and a president of the Imperial Federation League, another Milner-associated parallel organisation campaigning for the creation of a British superstate, naturally controlled by the Milner Group and its international associates, to replace the British Empire. Similarly, leading Milnerite Lord Lothian, the future ambassador to the US, who was later praised by Churchill as our greatest ambassador, campaigned for an Anglo-American federation to rule the world and suppress Germany in 1909. When World War I eventually broke out in 1914, the same elite groups wanted not only to defend Britain against perceived German aggression, but to dismember the German Empire. To put things in the right perspective, this was equivalent to hacking a neighbour to death over a fence dispute. As observed by President Wilson's advisor, Colonel House, the British representatives wanted to take over Germany's former African colonies. That's from House's diary, published in 1917, quoted in Hodgson. German Southwest Africa was rich in mineral deposits, and diamonds had been discovered there in 1908. Sure enough, after the war, the Milner Group controlled League of Nations put Germany's colonies under the control of British colonies, which were in turn controlled by the same Milner Group and its Fabian collaborators. German Southwest Africa was put under the mandate of Milner-controlled British South Africa. The whole League of Nations mandate system, which placed territories taken from Germany under international, i.e. British control, had been devised by the Milner Group itself in collaboration with the Fabian Society. The head of the League's mandate department was Lord Lothian's minion George Louis Beer, a prominent American Milner Group member and notorious Germanophobe. The Anglo-American establishment and its associates also held extensive mining and rubber interests in the Belgian Congo, over which they were obviously prepared to wage war against Germany. A German offer to withdraw from Belgium in exchange for the Belgian Congo was summarily dismissed. In short, from Prime Minister Herbert Asquith, who was a founder of the Pilgrims-associated Anglo-American League and whose Churchill-dominated government declared war on Germany in August 1914, to the chairman of the U.S. War Industries Board, the General Secretary of the Reparations Commission, Churchill's crony Arthur Salter, and Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour, all key figures in the World War I project, belonged to the same Milner-led international clique. Long before the war, this clique started off by campaigning for war against Germany. During the war, it campaigned for the creation of the League of Nations to contain Germany. It launched another anti-German propaganda campaign headed by none other than Pilgrim Society President Lord James Bryce, who produced the Bryce Report on alleged German atrocities in Belgium. It campaigned for America's entrance into the war and support for the League of Nations. After the war, it ensured that Germany and its colonies were placed under the authority of the League of Nations, which it had created and which it controlled. At the same time, its propaganda machine claimed not only that Germany had started the war, but incredibly that the League of Nations was a German conspiracy. That is pretty incredible. The truth of the matter was that Britain was the world's largest empire, and therefore international organization was inextricably tied to British imperial interests. As future US President Woodrow Wilson put it in a speech to the Pilgrim Society in 1904, quote, "The Anglo-Saxon people have undertaken to reconstruct the world." Accordingly, while Britain had started a world war against Germany to prevent the latter from dominating Central Europe, after the war, the Bank of England launched various projects, like the Anglo-Austrian Bank, in which Churchill's benefactor Henry Strakosch was a key figure, with a view to doing precisely that, namely to control Central Europe. Nor were the Bank of England's designs limited to Europe. In addition to planning a British-controlled Central European bank, it wanted to establish a global network of central banks, as well as impose an international gold standard. Simultaneously, identical plans involving a gold reserve bank of the United States of Europe were presented by Frank Vanderlip of the Rockefeller-controlled and Morgan-associated National City Bank of New York. At the same time, Vanderlip was calling for a certain private organization controlled by Morgan Rockefeller interests, the CFR, to take foreign relations out of the hands of the US government. The obvious aim was to put both international finance and international relations under the control of the Anglo-American establishment. It is essential to bear in mind that the Anglo-American establishment already controlled gold mines, bullion brokers, the shipping and railway lines moving gold across the globe, and the banks providing loans against that gold. South Africa's gold production, which alone amounted to half of the world's newly mined gold, was controlled by mining companies like Rothschild co-owned Rand Mines Limited, Goldfields, and the appropriately named Anglo-American Corporation. This gold was shipped from Cape Town to London, where it was refined at N.M. Rothschild's Royal Mint refinery and then sold through N.M. Rothschild. Even the gold price was being fixed daily in the fixing room of N.M. Rothschild's new court offices on St. Swithin's Lane. It is not difficult to see, except perhaps in certain self-interested quarters of British conservatism, that the imposition of an international gold standard would have given this clique total control over the world's financial system and hence over the world's economic and political systems. Though the gold business brought enormous worldwide power and influence to the Anglo-American establishment, it was only a corner of its global empire, which included diamonds, oil, and other natural resources which it sought to monopolize. These schemes, therefore, must be analysed in conjunction with similar international projects launched by the same interests. Among these, we may mention the Morgan-controlled American International Corporation, a massive worldwide foreign investment concern representing key financial interests like J.P. Morgan, Kuhn Loeb, Rockefeller, and significantly Ernest Cassell, whose president, Charles A. Stone, doubled as director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Another such project was the International Acceptance Bank, which counted Bank of England associates N.M. Rothschild, corporate member of Chatham House, among its stockholders and was chaired by Paul Warburg of Rothschild Associated Kuhn Loeb, CFR founding member and president of the Council of the Federal Reserve Board. That this was part of a worldwide Anglo-American conspiracy is evident from the fact that already in January 1920, Bank of England, Lazard, and Morgan Rockefeller interests jointly called for an international economic conference to reorganize the world's financial and commercial structure. All this amounts to incontrovertible proof of the Anglo-American connection's global designs. These global designs are further demonstrated by the fact that Britain's policy of containment was far from being limited to Germany. The ruling British elites and their international associates also aimed to eliminate Russia as a rival power. Simultaneously, with their propaganda campaign against Germany, they instigated various other projects, such as the Anglo-Japanese Alliance, designed to contain both Russia and Germany. Just 2 years later, in 1904 to 1905, they financed Japan's war against Russia, as well as funding Russia's revolutionary movement. In 1907, Pilgrim's founder Lindsay Russell set up the Japan Society of New York in collaboration with fellow pilgrim Jacob Schiff, who was a key figure in the international conspiracy against Tsarist Russia. During World War I, these international financial interests used Russia as a pawn against Germany while secretly financing Russia's anti-Tsarist revolutionaries. And so the world witnessed the macabre spectacle of King George V, head of the world's largest and most powerful empire, refusing to save his cousin, the Tsar and his family from being butchered by Lenin's communist henchmen. Clearly, more powerful interests than the royal family were involved, and they were indisputably Britain's invisible government. After the revolution, the same elements wanted to dismember the Russian Empire, where they held extensive banking, mining, and other interests, but eventually settled for doing business with the new regime. Louis Kiltzer, in his well-researched but somewhat one-sided analysis of Britain's World War II intrigues, Churchill's Deception, points out that as far as the British leadership was concerned, the real problem was not Hitler, but Germany itself. From a British perspective, World War II was a continuation of World War I, which had been aimed at degrading German influence in Central Europe. The real British aim in World War II was to dismember Germany. However, Kiltzer fails to pay sufficient attention to the fact that Britain's political leaders did not rule on their own, but with the collaboration and often on behalf of certain powerful financial interests. We cannot ignore the international financiers who had been behind the Boer War and funded both world wars, as this clique was identical with that which ruled Britain from behind the scenes. As already noted, the infamous Boer War was about control of diamond and gold mines by the Rhodes Rothschild aka Milner Group. It was funded by the Rothschilds and their agents J.P. Morgan & Co. with the help of American loans arranged through the Milner-controlled Bank of England and its close associate J.P. Morgan, and paid for with gold from the group's South African mines. Similarly, the British and Allied war effort in World War I was financed and supplied by the same interests. Of decisive importance were large loans taken up through a banking syndicate led by Morgan. To pay for these loans, the Bank of England bought up all of South Africa's gold production and shipped it from London to Ottawa and other Canadian ports, where it was converted into bars and transferred to Morgan accounts in New York and Philadelphia. In recognition of this fact, Daily Mail proprietor Lord Northcliffe exclaimed that the war was won within the walls of Morgan Grenfell, J.P. Morgan's London branch, where the loan negotiations had taken place. Indeed, without US aid, Britain would have been unable to provide financial assistance to France, and without France, who in turn bankrolled smaller allies, the Allied war effort would have collapsed. The combination of European gold transfers to and war purchases in the US ensured that the latter, who had previously owed large sums to Europe, was transformed from a debtor into a creditor as the world's was transformed from a debtor into a creditor country, and paved the way for America's replacement of London as the world's financial centre. The main beneficiaries of all this were the Morgan Group and associated banking and industrial interests, who provided arms, munition, and other war supplies to Allied and US governments. The Morgan Group, too, dominated the 1929 Reparations Conference, which created the Bank for International Settlements, an international association of central banks which, of course, was dominated by the same Milner-Morgan interests, and is now set to become the world's central bank. Yeah, the BIS is the central bank of central banks, right? It must be indisputable that just as British and American relations with Russia and Japan were dictated by financial interests, so were relations with Germany. Already by 1931, that is, before Hitler, economics made up the substance of British-German discussions, with the Treasury and the Bank of England, a private organisation, having a greater say than the Cabinet or the Foreign Office, i.e. the government. Given the financial interests controlling Britain's domestic and foreign policy, this was entirely natural. As pointed out by Quigley, Montague Norman of the Bank of England and J.P. Morgan dominated not only the financial world, but also international relations. It is entirely logical, therefore, for the same financial interests to be behind the European Union. After World War II, Germany was indeed dismembered, and Hitler's unification of German-speaking territories reversed. But the real aim of those who had financed the war was to control Germany's economy for their own purposes. Control over German and European economies was the principal motive behind the European Union movement. A Europe dominated by an independent-minded Germany was to be replaced with a European Union dominated by Anglo-American interests. Hence, the official Anglo-American aim to make Germany geared to a world system controlled by the same interests. Control over Europe's economic and political system through control of its finances was the motive behind Anglo-American schemes such as a Central European Bank and a Bank of the United States of Europe, going back to the early 1920s. It follows that all major events taking place between 1890 and 1950 must be analysed within the wider context of international financial interests aiming to reorganize the world for their own agenda. Focusing on supposed German plans to take over the world in 1939 to 1945, while ignoring the activities of Anglo-American interests doing just that since the 1890s, makes poor history writing. Indeed, it amounts to deliberate distortion of historical facts. The same applies to ignoring the leading role played in this by the Milner Group and its international associates. I'm going to have to take a pause there. Throat's getting a bit tickly. I need a little thirst quencher. That section was dense. That's the kind of section I would probably need to read that 2 or 3 times and to look up all the names and the references and to really not fact check but verify, you know. But everything I've double checked and looked up that he's referred to so far has turned out to be solid, you know, and that reference there to Quigley, that's part of what makes Tragedy and Hope such a valuable book, is that he writes a history that does include the financial movers and shakers and the financial interests, whereas a lot of the mainstream history books and curriculums in our schools and universities leave that part out. Don't talk so much about your financial interests, the Rothschilds and the Morgans, et cetera, all these groups and families, right? And also oftentimes the historical events such as the wars and the battles, the fighting, the conflict, often that's those histories are written as a separate history from the development of the economics and the financial systems, even though they're very closely tied together. And so understanding how Keynesian economics comes into it, understanding how the mining and processing of precious metals comes into it, then the establishment of central banks, then fiat currencies, backed by gold, not backed by gold. It's all very hard to understand and it's a very complicated picture, but you need to really know about all those different aspects in order to get a good sense of the big picture, right? I think that's the point that I'm trying to make here. So we've got a few comments over on YouTube, and we got Frank saying that Erskine Childers later became 4th president in Ireland, inaugurated in 1973 and died in office. Oh, did he? Right. And also, Frank says, saw J.J. Astor's mansion in Astoria, USA in 2005. Astoria was named after him. Right, so you've got Rhodes and Rhodesia, and you've got Astor and Astoria. Is it still called Astoria as well? I bet that was an impressive mansion. Frank says, I think we need to prefix the term world controllers with the word Fabian, i.e. the Fabian world controllers. Yeah, the Milner-Fabian world controllers. The Rhodes Milner-Fabian. You could just go on forever. The Rhodes Milner Rothschild Fabian world controllers. Frank saying the special relationship between the City of London and the Pentagon nexus, brain and brawn of the John D. British Empire. Yeah, that special relationship is a very critical piece of the puzzle as well. And Richard Grove does some really good work on that. And I think tends to, like, he's got a great understanding of how Britain, I say Britain, like it's not, it's not us doing it, but how the British establishment, the likes of the Rhodes Scholars and the people who were continuing the Rhodes-Milner schemes, they wanted to bring America back into the fold, and this Pilgrim Society that we were just learning about there was that was their mission, right? To draw those, to build and establish that special relationship, and to draw America back in, and I think it was pretty largely, successful to a great degree. I don't think America has been able to retain much independence. I think a key turning point would have been its being dragged into the world wars when a large proportion of the population were in favor of isolationism and staying out of it and just letting the European powder keg explode without their involvement. But then, of course, you have the false flag events, which were used to drum up American support for entering into the wars, and then the rest is history, as they say. So that special relationship is a really interesting angle to learn about, particularly through this, sort of hidden history and the occulted connections. Very critical stuff. Then we've got Frank Lennon as well, saying, in November 1910, 6 men, Nelson Aldrich, A. Platt Andrew, Henry Davison, Arthur Shelton, Frank Vanderlip, and Paul Warburg met at the Jekyll Island Club off the coast of Georgia to write a plan. And then LJ says, there's a book about that, isn't there, Frank? And I can answer that question. Yes, there is a book about that. It's over there on the shelf. It's called The Creature on Jekyll Island. Let's see if I can point to it. There, that one. It's by G. Edward Griffin. We read G. Edward Griffin's book, The Fearful Master, on the channel. But that book is massive. Really, I haven't read it yet, but I've heard extremely well referenced, and it's a bit of a page turner. G. Edward Griffin's a fantastic writer. As much as I'm loving this book, Ratiu is, long sentences, dense paragraphs. I would describe it as dry. There's the occasional bit of his sort of personality and humor coming through here and there. It's quite a dry read, and I'd say it's not a sort of page-turning, thrilling narrative as much as it is more sort of academic. And I think it's a really useful exercise to go through it and read it when you are reasonably familiar with a lot of these names, right? So having books like Hidden History under your belt, being relatively familiar with Quigley's work, having gone through the Fabian Freeway already, all that is like really relevant, necessary prep to get the value out of this book. I think if you were like new to this kind of research and you went straight in with this one, it probably wouldn't be the best place to start. It would take you so long to get through it because you would have to be continuously looking up all the different names and the references and the footnotes and everything. I'd say I'm probably, semi well prepared to take on this book, given what we've read on the channel and my exposure to the work of Jay Dyer and Richard Grove. I'm reasonably well versed in this stuff, but by no means an expert. And I will certainly be re-listening to these videos. Not that I like the sound of my own voice, but just because I can revise the information as I'm on, out walking or painting a wall or doing something else, right? So I'll definitely be re-listening to these for sure. Cool. That's the book, LJ. Creature from Jekyll Island. And Cyril's Way says, a spoonful of raw honey, Nick. Thank you. I need to start keeping that next to me as I live stream. And then instead of having a sip of my salty water, I can go for the raw honey instead. Frank is saying, look at the Balfour Israel situation, and the influence of the guys from that part of the world in American politics is staggering. Yes, the Balfour Declaration. I've got a book on that as well. But Balfour got mentioned, didn't he? So all these guys, all these people were around at the same time. And this book's really drawing that bridge between the Fabian Society and the Rhodes-Milner Roundtable Group, and showing that they are kind of working towards the same thing, really. And I don't know of any other book that makes those connections. There probably are some out there, but this is the first one for me that makes it very explicitly ties those two groups and movements together. Okay, hope you're all doing well. If you are enjoying the stream, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews, you can find ways to like, comment, share, subscribe, donate, support at that place. And I've pinned that to the top of all the chats, just in case you were wondering where that link is. It's right there. Alrighty, so this next section is the one that I was talking about, where it's about the Curtis-Churchill connection. So I'm quite looking forward to this one. This is probably going to be the last section we read. Let's just look ahead, see how long it is. Yeah, you're looking at about 10, 15 pages maybe. Yeah, this is a massive section. We might not even get through this in the next hour. Okay, EU and world government is the next section. So we got 26 pages. 26 pages. You know, we might do it. We might get it done. We'll see how we feel as we're going through it. But thanks for hanging out tonight. Hope you're enjoying the stream. And let's crack on, if my voice and throat don't totally give way. I might be running downstairs to get that raw honey. The EU and the Curtis-Churchill connection. When Lord Lothian died in 1940, Milner Group leader Lionel Curtis carried on his work. It is essential to note that, as admitted by Lord Salter, Curtis was the eminence grise of much of the public life of his time. Indeed, although holding no public office, Curtis acted as political consultant to various leaders, including Churchill. It was Curtis and Brand who had converted Churchill to the idea of federalism for the United Kingdom back in 1922 at Cliveden, where Churchill was a regular guest. Curtis was involved in a number of internationalist projects like the League of Nations and the British Commonwealth, aiming to expand British, i.e. Milner Group, influence and reduce that of other countries. As he remained the leader of the Milner Group until his death in 1955, it is only natural that he continued to be involved in international intrigues of this kind. Curtis and fellow Milnerite Lord Lothian were involved in the establishment of Federal Union, an organisation campaigning for a federation of Britain, Europe and America, in November 1938. As pointed out by Rose Martin, Federal Union was inspired by the ideas of the Milner Group founder Cecil Rhodes, and was later adapted to the agendas of the Fabian-controlled Socialist International. Curtis also dominated the Foreign Office Research and Intelligence Department. Further investigation shows beyond reasonable doubt that the Milner Group and its associates and collaborators, including Churchill, were behind the European project. To begin with, it's an established fact that the Milner Group was prominent among advisors to political leaders, especially those of liberal and conservative persuasion, like Lloyd George and Winston Churchill, on matters of empire, commonwealth and foreign affairs. Milnerite advice was dispensed both informally through social circles frequented by the powerful and the wealthy of the day, like Cliveden, and more formally through Milner-controlled organisations like Chatham House, which, from 1939, acted as formal advisor to the Foreign Office. So I wonder if Chatham House advised the Foreign Office not to release those 1 million documents back in 2011. Already during the war, in 1939, leading Milnerites like General Smuts and Sir Edward Grigg, later Lord Altrincham, proposed a federated Western Europe which was to be included in a regional bloc and associated through a military alliance with the United Kingdom. This bloc was to have a regional council, a joint parliamentary assembly, and a permanent secretariat. This Milnerite plan became the Council of Europe, proposed by Churchill in the same year. Like the Milnerite regional bloc, the European Union, as the Council was referred to, especially on the continent, was to have a committee of ministers, a consultative assembly, and a permanent secretariat. Like the Milnerite bloc, it was to have a common defence organisation, also proposed by Churchill in 1950. Like the Milner Group, Churchill envisaged world unity through the United Nations organisation, based on 3 or 4 regional groups, of which Europe was to be one, and in which Britain would play an important and possibly a decisive part. After the war, in November 1945, Curtis discussed the creation of an International Assembly of Europe with Foreign Secretary Bevin. His plan involved the established Milnerite tactic of creating a rising tide of public opinion, and then getting politicians who were suitably indoctrinated by experts like himself to shape that opinion. Yeah, that is the experts, right? Listen to the experts, a society, a scientific society, technocracy run by experts. Very important to set yourself up as these advisors, these intellectual, scientific, rational, objective creators of analysts as well. Actually, is another part of it, isn't it? Like, oh, we've crunched the numbers and we've run the data and we've done the computer modeling, and everyone has to wear nappies on their face for the next 2 years, say the experts. Continuing. It is evident from Curtis' writings that he believed in the mobilization of public opinion by a recognized and trusted leader, and that he saw Churchill as such a leader. Accordingly, as part of his propaganda campaign, he sent copies of his book World War, Its Causes and Cure, which he had just published in 1945, to fellow Europeanists Churchill and his son-in-law Duncan Sandys. In his book, Curtis campaigned for a union of the British Commonwealth and Western Europe as a step towards eventual union with America. This again shows why Germany was to be eliminated as an independent power. It was an obstacle to British designs of world hegemony. Curtis instigated the creation of university study groups at Oxford. He got Milnerite heavyweights like Sir Grant Robinson, the former chairman of the Committee of Vice-Chancellors, and principals of the universities of the UK, and Sir Arthur Salter, former Senior Deputy Director General of UNRRA, to write to Milner-controlled newspaper The Times in support of European Union. He mobilized his vast network of international connections to raise funds and to link the European and American sides of the movement. He had his Civitas Day and World War published and distributed in occupied Germany as part of the official Foreign Office program for German re-education, and planted his Europeanist agents in Adenauer's staff. Wow. I didn't know that Civitas Day, this Commonwealth of God, his 900-page book of his, was used for German re-education. That's good to know, isn't it? In September 1946, Churchill, his son-in-law Sandys, Robert Boothby, Major Edward Beddington Behrens, that's a great name, Edward Beddington Behrens, and Rettinger set up a steering committee to promote European Union. Also in September, Churchill gave his infamous speech at the University of Zurich. In October, when Churchill was looking to make another speech along the lines of Zurich, his crony, Leo Amery, a Milner Group member, consulted Curtis on European Federation, and the latter discussed the issue with Sandys. In May 1947, Churchill organized the Congress of Europe, which led to the creation of the United Europe movement in October 1948. The UEM had Sandys as General Secretary and was made up of a mixed crowd of Milner-Fabian elements, including Lord Walter Leighton, whose son Michael was rather conveniently involved with the British Steel Corporation, the metallurgy branch of the Allied Control Commission in Berlin, and the OEEC in Paris, and prominent Fabian socialist Victor Gollancz, publisher of Fabian News. Churchill's European movement was backed by Lord Balfour, a leading Milner Group member, an old friend and collaborator of the Fabian leadership and other industrialists and bankers. Milnerite godfather Curtis himself sat on the platform at the movement's inauguration. In July 1947, Sandys instigated the creation of a parallel French organisation, the Council Français pour l'Europe Unie, which was financed by a committee of leading French bankers. He also organised the Joint International Committee of the Movement for European Unity, with himself as chair and Rettinger as Secretary General, as an umbrella organisation to coordinate the various British, French and other committees and organisations working for a united Europe under British leadership. In 1948, the British section of Sandys JICM-EU proposed the establishment of a European Council to promote greater unity between European countries. The British plan, as set out by Foreign Secretary Bevin in October 1949, entailed 3 stages. The first stage was the Brussels Treaty, which was the hard core of the European system. The second stage was the Atlantic Pact, which was meant to reinforce the first stage with American power and wealth, and the third stage consisted in the creation of the Council of Europe. The Treaty of Brussels, signed on 17th of March 1949, created the Brussels Treaty Organisation, aka Western European Union, as an expansion of the original Mutual Defence Agreement between Britain and France to include Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands. The Atlantic Pact, aka North Atlantic Treaty, which created the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, or NATO, was signed on the 4th of April 1949 in Washington, D.C. The Treaty of London, which created the Council of Europe, was signed at St. James's Palace on the 5th of May 1949. As pointed out by Joint Under-Secretary for Foreign Affairs Anthony Nutting, Britain, in reality the Milner Group, had played a leading role in setting up all these organisations. The pattern that emerges from the above is very clear. It involved the creation by Milner-Fabian circles of various, apparently unconnected organisations and their subsequent merging with organisations controlled by the same circles. It is evident from statements by Bevin and others that the whole scheme was to be controlled by Britain and backed by American power and wealth. Yeah, so the intellectual class, the people with the plans, the agendas, the ones who are strategizing and who are giving the orders are sitting in Britain, and then the dogs, the soldiers, the muscle, who go and carry these things out. That's kind of the role that America ends up playing. The power, they provide. So yeah, I suppose they provide wealth. The Wall Street, the Eastern establishment of America, but it's the power as well, isn't it? It's the power that is extremely critical as well to this whole agenda. Okay, carrying on. Indeed, in January 1949, Bevin called for the work of the Brussels Treaty Organisation to be transferred to the Council of Europe Secretariat and for the Organisation for European Economic Cooperation, another British creation, to be fused with the Council of Europe mechanism. Bevin also proposed equal numbers for British and French members of the Council of Europe's Committee of Ministers, but lower numbers for Germany and Italy in a thinly veiled attempt to gain control over the Council in collaboration with the French. The high numbers for France were justified on the grounds that France's North African possessions were close to Europe. It should be noted that organisations created in Brussels or Paris were to be subordinated to organisations created in London. Although the Council of Europe was to have its seat in neutral Strasbourg, the choice of London, as opposed to Paris, as the place for the Council's creation was decided by the British Foreign Office, which was under Milner-Fabian influence. All this could only lead to one thing: the monopolisation of Europe's economic, political and military systems by British-led international money interests. The idea of monopolizing German and European industry admittedly had a long history. In the 1920s, the Rockefeller Standard Oil had entered into a cartel with Germany's petrochemical monopoly IG Farben. Similarly, in early 1928, Churchill's crony Robert Boothby went to Germany for a meeting with leading coal, iron and steel industrialists. Apparently, during discussions with steel magnate Friedrich Thyssen of the German United Steel Works and fellow industrialists, a proposal had been made for a European coal, iron, and steel consortium under British leadership. On his return to London in February, Boothby said to the House of Commons that between them, this country, Britain, and Germany could control practically the whole of the coal markets of the world outside the United States. Boothby at the time was parliamentary private secretary to Chancellor of the Exchequer Winston Churchill, which means that the proposal originated in Churchill's office. In 1950, Boothby reminded the House of his earlier speech, adding that he had anticipated the Schuman Plan by 22 years. By then, leading establishment mouthpieces like The Times and The Economists were calling for Britain's, quote, closest possible association with the project. Leading Milnerite Lord Leighton, speaking for the Liberals, and Conservative spokesman on foreign affairs Anthony Eden urged the government to join the European project. Another telling scheme spawned by Churchill's entourage was the so-called Eden Plan of March 1952, in which Churchill's deputy and Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden, later Lord Ioan, a cousin of leading Milnerite Lord Halifax, proposed that the European coal and steel community be placed under the political authority of the Council of Europe, which Churchill himself had founded in collaboration with Ernest Bevin. As Britain, which already had the largest steel and engineering production, was a dominant member of the Council of Europe, placing the ECSC under the Council's authority was a step towards monopolization of Europe, and in particular German industry and economy, by the Anglo-American circles, to which Churchill and Eden belonged. Earlier, Foreign Secretary Eden had openly admitted that, quote, all through these years, gradually we have drawn Germany into the Western orbit. We have drawn this part of Germany into the Schuman Plan. Moreover, the US drafted German Constitution of 1949 conveniently contained a clause providing for the transfer of sovereign powers to international institutions like the ECSC and the Council of Europe. In a parallel move on the other side of the Atlantic, U.S. Secretary of State George C. Marshall gave a speech at Harvard in June 1947 in which he promised U.S. financial assistance to Western Europe if the latter provided a plan for a recovery program. The European Recovery Program, aka Marshall Plan, was initiated in the following year by CFR members William L. Clayton and George F. Kennan, based on David Rockefeller's CFR report, Reconstruction in Western Europe. As the CFR was the sister organization of the Milner Group-controlled Chatham House, there can be no doubt that the Marshall Plan was designed in collaboration with the Milner Group. CFR member Averell Harriman was in charge of the Marshall Aid. Both the Marshall Plan and the American Committee for a United Europe were launched after consultations with Rettinger, Sandys, Spack, and other Europeanists connected with the Council of Europe. Spack was appointed president of the Council's Consultative Assembly, which was dominated by members of the Fabian Society. The latter had strengthened its dominant position in international relations during the war, when Europe's left-wing intelligentsia emigrated to England, where not a few joined the ranks of the Society and its fronts, from the Labour Party to LSE, and later the Socialist International. The FS was now able to dominate the Council Assembly through a network of wartime connections, and in particular through the Socialist International, whose Socialist Intergroup sat on the Assembly. A similar Fabian-controlled socialist group operated within the ECSC itself. Thus, the Coordinating Committee on European Unity, ACUE, the Council of Europe, and ECSC were all controlled by the same clique. Their obvious objective was to reconstruct Europe in line with Milner-Fabian designs as part of a wider world federalist plan. In addition to the European movement, the same international interests also launched the secretive Bilderberg Group. The group developed from meetings organized by Rettinger in September 1952 and attended by Chatham House and CFR members, and it held its first conference in 1954. The British side included the Fabian Grey Eminence Joseph Rettinger and his colleagues, Hugh Gateskill of the Fabian Society Executive Committee and Dennis Healy, also of the Fabian Society Executive Committee. Member, later chairman of the Fabian International Bureau Advisory Committee and Chatham House councillor. Among other prominent Europeanists to join was left-wing mastermind and Fabian collaborator David Astor. I feel like we've got to do a little more learning and reading about this Astor family. I do have a book about them, but I have a feeling it's kind of a mainstream puff piece type book. But they are showing up quite a bit. On the US side, were leading CFR members McCloy, Allen, Dulles, Averell Harriman, C.D. Jackson, and David Rockefeller. On the continental side were Guy Mollet, vice president of the Socialist International, who became Prime Minister of France in 1956 to 1957. The Italian Christian Democrat Alcide de Gasperi. We have seen that the category of Christian Democrats included the likes of Adenauer, and the Belgian Paul van Zeeland of the European League for Economic Cooperation, an organization using the economic approach to European Union and funded by David Astor. The Bilderberg Group was specifically designed to bring European governments and business interests together and harmonize US and European policies on Europe. It was in fact a more effective forum for US-European dialogue, leading to European unification than organizations like ACUE. The Treaty of Rome was a product of Bilderberg discussions. The other key organization was the Action Committee for a United States of Europe, founded by Jean Monnet in 1955. The European Movement, the Bilderberg Group, and ACUSE, Action Committee for a United States of Europe, were the most important elite groups behind the 40s and 50s campaign for a united Europe. All three shared the same Anglo-American origins and sources of support. Interesting. I'm going to see what that Aldrich reference is. I think it's Richard Aldrich. We did talk about him. I did say I've got a book of his called The Hidden Hand. I just want to remind myself which book it is that he's referencing, because that sounds pretty important. Oh, I can't even find the bibliography at the end of the chapter. Okay, so it's Aldrich. All right, so there it is. If anyone's interested, Richard J. Aldrich, it's that top one there. OSS, CIA, and European Unity, the American Committee on United Europe, and that is in, I think, a magazine or a journal, International History Review, Volume 18, Number 4, London, November 1995. Heavily referenced in this chapter, though. We got somebody on the YouTube chat. Bro, hi, Becky Foster. Good evening. Hope you're doing well out there. Have you brought Squidgington Foster along with you? All right, continuing. Pro-EU propaganda has it that Monnet was a saintly figure with no party affiliation and no interest in politics. But no amount of propaganda and disinformation can cover up the fact that working for the abolition of the nation-state is by definition a left-wing enterprise, which puts Monnet squarely in the left camp. Monnet's left-wing allegiance is confirmed by ACUE records, stating that he concentrated deliberately on labour and socialist elements at the expense of the participation of the right. In particular, both Monnet and his collaborators belonged to the same left-wing CFR Chatham House circles behind the European movement. Monnet and the Dulles brothers had already been collaborators on the League of Nations Supreme Economic Council back in 1919. Monnet was an old friend of Lazard Partners and leading Milnerites Lord Brand and Lord Kindersley, who was also a director of the Rothschilds Sun Alliance. He was supported by Lazard brothers and J.F. Dulles, who provided him with financial backing in the 1920s and 30s. His close personal friend and staunch Europeanist Dulles financed Monnet's company Monnet, Murnane & Co. Monnet was chairman of the Anglo-French Economic Coordination Committee in 1939. Let me redo that one. Monnet was chairman of the Anglo-French Economic Coordination Committee in 1939, was later appointed by Churchill to the British Purchasing Commission in New York and the British Supply Council in Washington, and became a top-level unofficial advisor and policymaker for the Marshall Plan. Other close friends and backers were CFR members Averell Harriman, Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, and Supreme Commander of the NATO forces in Europe, General Alfred Grunther. One of Monnet's financiers was the Ford Foundation, which was chaired by his personal friend McCloy, who was also director of the Rockefeller Foundation. It follows that Monnet was a front man for Anglo-American interests. Significantly, in May 1950, he called on his Lazard friends Brand and Kindersley in London to discuss his Schuman plan before meeting political leaders. Above all, it is essential to recall that the idea of a United States of Europe had been developed by Monnet's Milnerite friend and collaborator Arthur Salter. Salter was a former Liberal with Labour sympathies. He had briefly been a Fabian Society member who later joined the Conservatives only because the Conservatives had become more liberal. Salter had also been acting chairman of the Chatham House Council in the early 1930s. Chatham House was the official advisor to the Foreign Office, which was itself run by Milner-Fabian associates like Anthony Eden. Others, like Frank Ashton Gwatkin, were members of both the Chatham House Council and the FO. In 1940, a Chatham House team headed by Milnerite Arnold J. Toynbee came up with a plan proposing a Franco-British Union, a plan eagerly adopted by Churchill, but frustrated by Germany's invasion of France. The ECSC's successor, the European Economic Community, had its roots in the same circles. As evident from Churchill's 1946 Zurich speech, Franco-German partnership was to be the basis for a United States of Europe. Salter, a key ideologue of European Union, was closely connected with both Churchill and the Milner Group. He had been a secretary in the Admiralty under Churchill, later becoming a high official in the League of Nations Secretariat and in the UN Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, and had influential friends in Paris, London, Geneva, Washington, and New York. He was also the author of the United States of Europe, which he published in 1931, where he chaired the Chatham House Council. His plans did not materialize at the time because Germany had its own plans. And we did show that book on the last stream, the United States of Europe. All right, continuing. However, as Salter, who was working with Fabian Society Honorary Secretary and later Chairman and President G.D.H. Cole, admits, Chatham House recommendations, like those made by Salter and his colleagues, quote, can be seen to have anticipated much that later became orthodox in Whitehall and elsewhere. In 1948, Salter was appointed Chairman of the Advisory Council of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, a part of McCloy's World Bank, which had recently provided France with a $250 million loan and worked with leading British and American bankers. Finally, Salter was an intimate friend and admirer of H.G. Wells and his idea of ordered world society, and remained an obedient emissary for Curtis, Churchill, and other leading conspirators to the end. Salter and his bosses all shared Wells's obsession with world organization. Curtis, in his World War, praises Salter, along with Elihu Root, Lord Lothian, and Lord Beveridge, as exceptional champions of world federalism. Root belonged to the Milner-associated Morgan Rockefeller Group. Lord Lothian belonged to the inner core of the Milner Group. Lord Beveridge was a personal friend of Milner leader Lionel Curtis, as well as of John Davison Rockefeller Jr., as noted earlier. Churchill's parliamentary private secretary, Boothby, belonged to the same circles and shared their ideology. Churchill claimed, in the Commons, that the European movement was not financed by federalists, but relied upon voluntary contributions, yeah, of course, from America and England. Just like your digital ID is going to be voluntary, the contributions were voluntary at first. This was a typical Churchillian tactic by which he sought to subtly deflect attention from the real issue. Voluntary, the contributions might well have been, in the sense that they were not made under coercion, but this was beside the point. What Churchill conveniently failed to disclose was who the contributors were, even though he knew their exact identity. There is no doubt that there were Federalists among British backers of the European movement. As noted above, one of the key figures among them, David Astor, was a disciple of leading Milnerite and Federalist mastermind Lord Lothian himself, a co-founder of Federal Union. The Observer, which was edited by David Astor and owned by his father Lord Astor, wrote that, quote, "The choice of Europe lies between becoming either the Europe of Germany or Russia or federating under the leadership of Britain." In light of the facts, Churchill was being untruthful, and not for the first or last time. Incidentally, Curtis' statement shows that Europe was to be dominated by Britain, i.e. the Milner Group, itself. As for US backing, again, the evidence shows that European movement leaders, including Sandys, had specifically requested that US financial support for the movement remain secret. Allegedly, this was to prevent communist charges of American capitalist intervention. But it is equally conceivable, indeed probable, that the leadership did not want the European, including British, public to know that the movement was bankrolled by international money interests with a federalist agenda. As pointed out by the Daily Telegraph, recently discovered US documents include a State Department memo advising the Vice President of the EEC, Robert Marjolin, to push for monetary union by stealth and suppress debate until such union was virtually inescapable. Unfortunately, while exposing the American hand in the Federalist movement, the Telegraph is silent on the British role. In addition, the archives of the various Europeanist movements were conveniently destroyed in the 1950s before a full investigation could be launched. Even so, the evidence is quite sufficient to show that Churchill's collaborators, Sandys and Co., had arranged for American funds to be secretly funneled to the European movement by Frank Wisner of the CIA Office of Policy Coordination through the European Cooperation Administration, which was an agency created in 1948 to administer martial aid and ACUE. Both the CIA and the ACUE were founded and controlled by the CFR and its Milner Group associates, who were, of course, Federalists. They did not always publicly announce that they were Federalists, but this was only because they believed that federation was to be established gradually by successive steps, beginning with any international organization and expanding it into world government, or as they euphemistically termed it, international union, international sovereignty, etc. In other words, by stealth, as specified in the memo to Marjolin. And by stealth is the way the Fabian Society like to do things, isn't it? It's the totalitarian tiptoe, the turtle plodding along slowly, slow and steady, over the long term, but always ready to strike and strike hard when the moment is right. So continuing. Above all, the evidence shows that the European project was not in any way a popular movement, but one initiated and pushed through by international money interests. This is evident from the statements of Churchill himself, who admitted that, quote, "Public opinion had to be mobilized in order to persuade powerful governments to turn our requests into realities. Serious hesitations had to be overcome. Mobilizing public opinion and persuading governments to act in ways which were convenient to the Milner Group and associates was exactly what arch-conspirator Curtis had planned. Despite initial opposition, Britain itself applied for membership only 3 years after the creation of the EEC, in a clear demonstration of the truism that things anticipated by Chatham House have a tendency to sooner or later become Whitehall orthodoxy, just as in the US CFR recommendations tend to become official White House policy. As observed by Quigley, what Curtis thought should be done and what would happen a generation later. This was not due to Curtis' clairvoyant abilities, but to the Milner Group's habit of long-term scheming. Churchill, of course, regardless of what his followers might claim today, did not oppose but approved of Britain's application for membership. The belief that Churchill was a Euro-skeptic is based on the misinterpretation of statements by Churchill, such as, "We are with Europe, but not of it." But, as pointed out by Churchill's collaborator and successor Edward Heath, those who hold this belief ignore the fact that Churchill's above statements are not statements of principle, but merely expressions of Churchill's belief or wishful thinking that Britain could be a separate power alongside the United States and a united Europe. Without an empire, this was out of the question. Churchill himself used the word dream in 1930. It is one thing to say, "We shall never join a united Europe no matter what," which Churchill did not say, and another to say, "We have a dream," which Churchill did say. Clearly, the use of the word dream was calculated to appeal to public emotion, which was typical of Churchill's propagandistic writings and speeches. Churchill often appeared to be saying certain things without actually saying them, said things he did not mean, or told plain lies. But given that Churchill did choose to use the word dream, it is proper to highlight the fact that a dream is one thing, whereas hard facts are quite another. When the latter contradict the former, the dream becomes an illusion or a lie. The truth, on the other hand, is that in June 1940, Churchill had written, published, and promoted the Declaration of Union between Great Britain and France, in which he announced that France and Britain shall no longer be two nations, but one Franco-British Union, with a joint constitution. And that quote comes from The Times, and is also quoted in Lionel Curtis's book. There is no lack of Churchillian statements clearly showing that he was quite prepared to surrender British sovereignty at the drop of a hat when it served his agenda, or the agenda of his financial backers. Doubters need only read his speeches, such as the House of Commons debate of the 27th of June 1950. Significantly, what Churchill apologists deliberately attempt to cover up is Churchill's role in the creation of the European community, and in particular, his insistence on the community being based on Franco-German economic cooperation. Moreover, what both the apologists and Heath himself are silent on is Churchill's connections with the Milner Group and the financial interests behind it. They fail to ask themselves why Churchill persistently surrounded himself with Europeanists like Salter, Boothby, and Sandys, all of whom, like Churchill himself, were linked to certain money interests. Why his private secretary discussed the monopolization of the world's coal markets with German industrialists, or why, by the same secretary's own admission, the Schuman Plan was based on a scheme he himself had designed 22 years before. Their failure to objectively analyze the facts clearly exposes a persistent lack of interest in historical truth. On the available evidence, it is indisputable that the organizations responsible for promoting European Union represented Chatham House CFR circles, which in turn represented the international financial interests which had created them. The activities of these organizations also expose the existence of a privately controlled international opinion-forming and decision-making mechanism which completely bypassed democratic processes. For example, no European nation ever elected or appointed Monet & Co. to design a federal Europe. And what can we say of the US State Department memo demanding that debate on monetary union be suppressed, other than that it amounts to incontrovertible proof of the undemocratic forces behind the union? It is interesting to note in this connection some of the persons awarded the Charlemagne Prize, aka Karl's Prix of the German city of Aachen. between 1950 and 1959 for their outstanding contribution to the European project. I didn't know he was going to talk about the Charlemagne Prize. That's I was a little bit ahead of the curve there because we started the previous live stream going into the list of recipients. But yeah, I'm glad that he's included it here for sure. So some of the people who've received it between 1950 and 1959 are Richard Coudenhove Kalergi, Hendrik Brugmans, Alcide de Gasperi, Jean Monnet, Konrad Adenauer, Winston Churchill, Paul Henry Spack, George C. Marshall, and Robert Schumann. Oh, there's a website here, carlspree.de. There you are. Churchill, de Gasperi, and Spack belonged to the United European Movement, which, as we have seen, was funded by international money interests, as was Monnet. And I just saw what you said there, page 286, quotable dynamite, says Frank, so I'm going to stick a little blue. Post it on there to remind me to come back. Okay. We've got about another, let's see, I think another 10 pages or so. What time are we on? 21:37. Okay, we'll do a bit more. The rest were close collaborators associated with the same interests. As to the specific money interests behind the European project, we find that they were the same as those behind Chatham House and the CFR. The associated Rockefeller and Morgan groups were the most obvious among the biggest players on the US side. Less obvious, but equally significant, is the involvement of the allied Harriman Group. Averell Harriman of the New York bank Brown Brothers Harriman & Co. was Lend-Lease Administrator for Britain and special presidential envoy to Churchill and Stalin under Roosevelt, U.S. Ambassador to London, Secretary of Commerce and Supervisor of the administration of the Marshall Aid Plan under Truman, and Under-Secretary of State for Political Affairs under J.F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. He was also a member of the powerful Business Advisory Council. His bank had long-standing close links to the Bank of England through Brown, Shipley & Co. of London, and was one of the CFR sponsors. Between them, these groups dominated the CFR, the CIA, the U.S. State Department, the Treasury, and other government departments, as well as private bodies and organizations supporting the European movement. Harriman himself was a staunch Europeanist and close friend and backer of Monnet, who, as already noted, was funded by the Rockefeller-controlled Ford Foundation along with his secretariat. On the British side, we can identify interlocking interests such as the Astors, longtime Morgan associates who were the main financial backers of Chatham House, which was located just across St. James Square from the Astors and was headed by leading Milner Group member Lord Astor himself. As we saw above, his son David Astor, one of the Britain's wealthiest men, was a key financial supporter of the European movement. The Astors were also involved in the intelligence and resistance organizations associated with the movement. Of particular interest are financial institutions such as Lazard Brothers & Co., London, who were old financial backers of Monnet and other leading Europeanists. In addition, leading Milner Group member and Lazard director Adam D. Maris served as Secretary General of the Emergency Economic Committee for Europe, an organization established in 1945 to formulate recommendations for Europe-related economic policy. Needless to say, Lazard interests, which operated as the semi-independent companies Lazard Brothers & Co., Lazard Frères & Co., and Lazard Frères and CIE in Paris, had long-standing close connections to the Bank of England, as well as with the Bank of France and the Rothschilds. The head of Rothschild Frères, Edouard de Rothschild, son of Alphonse, was a regent of the Banque de France, along with David Weil of Lazard. Lazard partner Lord Kindersley was a director of the Bank of England from 1914 to 1946. The British and continental Rothschild houses participated in various phases of the European project. Lord Nathan Natty Rothschild of London was involved in the creation of the Milner Group, which created both Chatham House and the CFR, which were later involved in promoting European Union. Baron Louis von Rothschild of Vienna was involved in Coudenhove-Kalergi's pan-European movement. Baron Robert de Rothschild of Brussels was involved in the European movement and the Treaty of Rome. Baron Edmund de Rothschild of Paris and Geneva was involved in the Bilderberg Group, which promoted European unification. Baron Guy de Rothschild of Paris, cousin of the above, became known as EEC banker Rothschild, and, as pointed out by Rothschild biographer Neil Ferguson, the same might equally well have been said of his London relatives. Since the 1870s, the Rothschilds had backed plans for a tunnel under the English Channel connecting England and France, and the project was promoted by their cousin and manager of their French business empire, René Mayer. From 1928 to 37, Mayer was manager, vice president, and secretary general of Rothschild's railway company, Chemin de Fer du Nord. Although the Nord Line was nationalized in 1937, the company received shares in the state-owned operation and a seat on its board, and after the war it was reincorporated into the Rothschild business interests. On becoming Prime Minister in 1953, Mayer campaigned for the construction of a Channel tunnel. I nearly said Chanel tunnel there. Getting tired. Might wrap it up after this paragraph. A Channel tunnel. In 1955, he succeeded Monet as president at the ECSC High Authority and was involved in all negotiations related to the common market. From 1957, he headed Rothschild Oil, mining and other companies, and in 1962 became president of the European movement in France. The Nord's line Calais-Lille-Paris is now covered by the Eurostar service, which connects with London St Pancras International via the Channel Tunnel, promoted by the Rothschilds and their Lieutenant Mayer. As for the Rothschilds and Mayer's London relatives, Lord Victor Rothschild, a former MI5 officer, acted as a sort of British Front Foundation for European movement projects. NM Rothschild were involved in raising finances for the ECSC, committed themselves to join the Common Market Banking Syndicate as early as 1961, set up a Channel study group consisting of their earlier Channel Tunnel Company and their associates Morgan, Grenfell, Lazard and Baring in 1967, launched the European Composite Unit, a forerunner of the Euro in 1973, and acted as advisors in the European Channel Tunnel project in 1981. Through their associate Mitterrand, they were also involved in the Euro system in 1989. Monet himself, in addition to long-standing links to London and New York banks like Lazard Brothers and Kuhn Loeb & Co., was also connected with the Edmund de Rothschild group. Similarly, Spaak and his family were friends of the Belgian Rothschilds. What emerges is that Rothschild interests and associates were involved in the creation, running and financing of the ECSC. Like the Morgan, Harriman and Lazard interests, the Rothschilds also had close links to the Bank of England. The interests involved at all levels and stages of the European project are identical to those involved in the formation of the Milner Group, the Pilgrim Society, and related organizations, forming a global web of conspiracy and deception. Thus, the tracks of the international money power have left a long and very clear trail across the face of history, stretching from the British South Africa Company to the League of Nations, the UN, and the EU. In particular, the heavy involvement in the European project of international financial interests and the secret services, as well as the veil of secrecy shrouding its finances involving secret accounts, special budgets, etc., shows not only that the EU was part of a worldwide conspiracy of international finance, but also that it was the creation of undemocratic forces. The well-documented monopolistic tendencies of the interests involved leave little room for doubting their intention to dominate Europe and the world. I think we're going to leave it there for today. We've got about another 8 pages to get to the end of this section, and my voice is just not going to get us that far, I don't think. Where is my bookmark? That was a good final paragraph, though, I think, to finish on. There is so much in this book that I feel like it would be an epic job to go through and validate and verify everything that he's talking about. But the more I read, the more I just get the sense that this is an incredibly well researched piece of work. You know, I feel like he's really done his homework. He's tying together a lot of threads of things, people that I've heard, bringing together the Fabians with the Milner kindergarten, with the Rothschild family, with Churchill. You know, this is this is like one of the broadest, big picture, sweeping books that I've ever read, because of the amount of players involved, the people it touches on, and establishing that thread from over 100 years ago up to the present day, up to the digital ID that is being rolled out, that is going to be voluntary. You know, it's up to you if you want to use it. You don't have to use it, but you can if you want. But every resident in Europe will have access to it by the time, or by the end of this year. Was it last year or this year? I can't remember what year it was. So all this stuff has been long planned. I think Ratiu makes a really good point there about nobody voted for the European Union. Nobody voted for the central bank. Nobody voted for the kind of currency that we have, the debt-based monetary system that we have. Really, the idea that you live in a democracy is laughable. You know, it's childish to think that. If you actually if you actually count the things that you have a say on and that you have voted for and that you have put your name against as something that you wanted, just think of all the different aspects of modern society in 2025. You know, the way business is carried out, the way things are imported and exported, the way food is produced, the types of things that you can buy in the supermarket, the types of entertainment that you can go and enjoy and engage in, the topics that are taught in schools, the things that are broadcast on your television or on your Netflix or wherever you watch your media. How much of your life, society, and culture and country have you actually had a say in and voted on? And you realize it's basically nothing. You basically asked which politician you want to get mad at for the next 4 years. That's what you get asked, and you get two options. That's it. Everything else is decided for you. Everything else is decided on your behalf by the likes of the scientific class of Huxley and his ilk, right? By the likes of the international financiers who are establishing these massive centralized databases of information gathered up, hoovered up about every single person, designed to permanently ensnare them in a digital gulag for the rest of their lives. The likes of the Milner Group, these off-stage power players who prefer to do things from the shadows, sow ideas, discontent, manipulate entire nations through diplomacy. That's what really comes out and is mind-blowing in this book, this Hidden History, Secret Origins of the First World War. Look at the number of tabs I put in there. It's silly, isn't it? But what really comes out in this book is how these people just manipulate entire countries by way of diplomacy. And they don't think anything of it. They don't have a problem doing that, knowing that these countries will send off their brightest and best, most vital young men to slaughter. And it is just a human sacrifice on all accounts. And it's the good guys slaughtering the good guys, because everyone involved in that fight thinks they're the good guy. Nobody thinks they're the bad guy. So, and they do it all on purpose, and they know that that's going to be the outcome of their actions, and they still carry on doing it. So these Milnerite, Fabian, scumbag, parasitic, coward world controllers, they need to be exposed. They need to be analyzed, identified. The legacy that they have set in motion needs to be understood so we can see where it's going. Luckily, the rate that it's accelerating and has been accelerating over the last 4 years means more and more and more people are going to find it very hard to ignore. There's not really an option to bury your head in the sand anymore. The best you can do nowadays is to just bury your mind in a constant stream of meaningless entertainment through some telescreen or other. And that's if you are not working every hour that God sends in order to, keep a roof over your head and pay the bills, because the bills are creeping up. Price of food's creeping up. Everything is going up. The currency is stagnating. The opportunities are declining. Meanwhile, more and more people are being imported into the country. And it's kind of a grim outlook when you look at things economically. But all done by design, all done by people who want to profit, who want to ensure their own legacy of wealth, power, influence over the coming generations, because that's how you join the big club. As Alan Watt often reminds us, your ticket into the big club is to build and amass massive amounts of wealth and power and hold on to it for a few generations, right? It's a very small clique of psychopathic parasites who are engaging in this, waging this campaign of control against the rest of us. And there's no reason for them to win or to establish this digital gulag system that they're trying to put in place. There's no reason it has to be like that. So, if you were concerned about it, perhaps you could send today's video to somebody who might be waking up or starting to ask questions or starting to join the dots, because more and more people are going to, like I said, more and more people are going to realize things and are going to want to know what's going on here. And, books such as this can act like a real, just like if you want to catch up in 30 hours, if you've just woken up and you started paying attention and you want to get up to speed as fast as possible, 30 hours, read this book and you'll be pretty much up to speed, and if you can't get hold of it because it's been memory hold and it's been exorbitantly priced out of most people's budget, then you can send them to Hayes Reviews and they can watch this whole series of videos. I'm just looking up now. I check in on Amazon every now and again to see Milner-Fabian Conspiracy. Right now there's no copies of it available on Amazon. So they're not even like pricing it out of existence. They've just made it not available at all on Amazon. So there you have it. Not there. But you can get Lord Milner's Second War for 10 quid. That's a bargain, and that's a really good one. I'd like to read that on the channel at some point. And then here you are. You're getting a nice little suggestion here. You can get Lord Milner's Second War plus Hidden History plus Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. So that's 40 quid. You could, that's what's that? It's the price of a takeaway for maybe two people. I mean, so that's like, I don't know, a couple of pints down the pub. It's for 40 quid, for the amount of information and the education you'll get reading these 3 books, 40 quid is, in my opinion, a no-brainer. It really is. Then you could add Tragedy and Hope onto that for 30 quid and Anglo-American Establishment for 21. And have yourself a nice little library on the go. Always good also to check out Fabian Freeway, see what the price of this is. So that's £330.99. People are probably not going to be rushing out to get themselves a copy of that. But I have read it in full on the channel, so you can avail yourself of that particular playlist and get the juicy lowdown on the history and the origins of the Fabian Society. If you can't get yourself a copy of that book, 300 quid is ridicule. I'm just going to check quickly on Bookfinder for copies of Milner-Fabian Conspiracy, because you never know. It's worth checking regular, because you never know when a cheap, affordable copy will appear. Right, so what have we got here? We've got 2. Right, so you could do 70. So if you're in the States, you can get a copy for £65, which is, is doable. It's still pretty steep for a paperback, but it's available. If you're in the United Kingdom, there is a £82.16 copy available on Amazon, apparently, after all. But they're the cheapest. Other than that, you're going 150 quid, 400 quid, 578 quid for a used copy of it. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Or there's a copy here in the United States for £205.83. Bonkers. Yeah, there it is. Look at that on eBay. So, not an easy book to get hold of. This one's seems to have multiple copies for 60. Yeah, there's three available. 3 copies available. Get it. Preserve it. That's a slightly different copy to mine. I think that might be some sort of reprint. Mine has a ISBN barcode down here on the bottom. So that might be, I don't know. Up to you. But I would recommend stocking up on books. You've probably figured that out by now if you've been hanging around on my channel for any amount of time. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. We got Timmy saying Deagle year. Is that in reference to the Deagle report? If it is, then yeah, grim times ahead for sure. That's all to do with the changes in populations that they were forecasting, and Britain was a massive reduction in population. I will tell you, the country that had a pretty positive forecast from the Deagle report was Vietnam. So if you can get yourself out there, get yourself a nice little English teaching job, you might be all right. Cyril's Way says, I think our strength is do no harm, but refuse to take no harm. Yeah. I like do no harm, and then also, but you do also have to be ready to defend yourself with force if necessary. If somebody else aggresses and initiates harm upon you, you got to be ready to meet that with violence, and that's the part that is missing. So very well and good to be pacifist and never initiate harm against somebody else, but it makes you weak if they initiate it against you and you have no skills or tools to defend yourself. So I agree, but also be prepared and make sure you've got some sort of skill or tool on hand to avail yourself of that will keep you and your loved ones secure in the event of someone else aggressing against you. So Frank is saying, $250 million loan, give me control of the money and I care not who makes the laws. Yeah. Frank's also talking about the conveniently destroyed documents. Yeah, always conveniently, or they go missing, or there's a burst pipe. There's a burst pipe, and the place floods, and all the documents get destroyed. Oops, sorry. Frank says absolute fortunes must have been covertly spent in propagandizing for the creation of the EU and its euro. Yeah, none of the people want it. None of the people in any of these countries want it. And here they are propagandizing and pushing for it, advocating for it, planning, building it, creating it, pushing it on the rest of us, and then giving themselves awards for doing it. It's bonkers, isn't it? Hasdak over on Rumble says, good vid, but I know my brain hasn't soaked anything up. Yeah, that's the hard thing about this kind of book, isn't it? When it's such distilled information, it's dense, it's packed. It's hard to pick out what is important, what's relevant, what's good to commit to memory. There's a number of things you could do about this, Hasdak, but a good place to start would be to take notes or maybe even build a sort of brain model. Have you ever seen the brain model that Richard Grove has? Start mapping whatever about the text appeals to you or resonates with you or stands out to you. It could be a name, it could be a treaty, it could be a particular organization, and then you just start pulling that thread and see where your curiosity leads you. So I will have forgotten already probably 90% of what I just read, but we've got it on the record. We've put a video out there. You can go back and listen to it. You can watch it on 1.5 speed, take notes, and map things out as you go. So it pays to visit and revisit and revise these things many, many times. And this is, I'm only, like, as I said earlier, I'm only sort of semi-conversant and familiar with all these kind of topics through, I would say, 4 years of fairly constant listening and absorbing information, right? From, like Jay Dyer Richard Grove, who are Geopolitics and Empire. These kind of channels that give you a deeper history. Ian Davis, as we mentioned. I take in a lot. I have a lot of input, and most of it doesn't stick, but some of it does. And the stuff that does, you start talking about that, and as you spend time talking about it and explaining it, you start to realize which bits you need to refresh your memory of, which bits you know pretty well, and which bits actually you've forgotten or you need to revise and brush up on. So it's all practice. So hang in there. And I appreciate you showing up and contributing, Hasdak. It's good to have you in the audience. And I like your advice and your idea as well of we need to get back to the 10 Commandments and stop shopping on a Sunday. Is that one of the 10 Commandments? Thou shalt not go shopping on a Sunday? Or is that just one you've added? Is that the 11th commandment? Thou shalt not shop on a Sunday. All right, LJ says it was packed indeed, lots of names, etc. Yeah, it was a really dry section, but I'm leaning towards this being a very true, very, like, the fact that the book's hard to find, it's massively overpriced, and everything that it ties together things that we've read elsewhere. I'm thinking it's actually a very scholarly and reliable and solid bit of work. Not to say we believe everything and that's written in it and everything is correct and assume it's all true, but I'm leaning towards it being a very scholarly and academic and rigorously produced piece of work. So yeah, good stuff for hanging in there and trying to absorb what you can for everyone. Well played. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Adam says, reading books is like eating meals. I don't remember everything in every meal that I've eaten, but they've made me. Yeah, nice. I like that. It goes in. It does go in. Even if you can't recall it, the next time you encounter the name Lionel Curtis, you'll be like, oh, that was in the Milner-Fabian conspiracy book, right? Or the next time you encounter one of the acronyms, it'll go, a little distant bell will ring, and you'll be like, oh, where did I hear that before? Where was it? So it's just about massive amounts of input. Think about a child who's learning to speak for the first however long. All they do is listen, right? And they're just absorbing it, and people are talking to them, and it's input. And then only after like this incredibly huge volume of input do they start to try to formulate the words and use them and communicate them themselves, right? So that's what it's all about. It's just getting the input, and then if you can, try and take notes and write things down, then that helps as well. That helps you commit things to memory and make connections. Because listening is to a certain extent is passive, isn't it? And if you're just passively consuming all the time, then you're gonna it's harder for things to stick. But if you're actively using it in conversation, in note taking, then it's easier for it's easier for you to recall it and use it. So, how's that? You're asking if Richard Grove's on YouTube. He is indeed. Here's a link to his channel. He's probably on other places as well, but I would recommend Richard Grove's Peace Revolution podcast. He does great work on Grand Theft World, but I haven't been keeping up with recent episodes, so I can't vouch for what it's like nowadays. But Peace Revolution podcast and maybe the first 100 episodes of Grand Theft World are all really, really great. I recommend them wholeheartedly. Very much so. A big inspiration and a personal hero of mine is Richard Grove. I really dig what he does. And he's the reason why I got a book cam in the first place, because he's got one. I don't want to be like him. It's the reason why I bought like, a lot of these books was because he mentioned them and talked about them. So he definitely had a key impact on my journey to create Hayes Reviews. And of course, I was a student in his Autonomy course, and that was a life-changing experience for me. Changed my conception of what value I have to offer, confidence in myself. It allowed me to practice skills that I use on every live stream, and I continue to use in my interactions, my public facing stuff that I do. So very much was all kicked off by literally by a conversation between Richard Grove and James Corbett, in fact, where they discussed books. That was Grand Theft World Episode 4. So if you can find that, that's a really good place to start. So I'm going to leave it there. I'll just remind you that if you want to support the show at any point, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews gives you everything you need to do that. Shoot me an email. Why not? Get in touch. Recommend a book. Tell me what you think. Give me some feedback, some suggestions, or just get it off your chest, because these are weird, strange, difficult times we're going through, and it's nice to let it out and be heard and have your life experience recognized by a fellow conscious human being from time to time. You can also follow me YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, Instagram, Twixter, Telegram, all good, viable places to keep up with what I do. And do not forget, consider joining the Devised community over on School. It is free. It will not be free forever, but that will get you at the calendar section up here. That will get you access to our twice weekly meetings. Next one will be tomorrow night. We've got a book club where we read a chapter and discuss what was in the chapter. We're currently reading 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. We started it earlier this week, and it is really good. This guy was an insider. He was a public relations exec until he realized that the technology of television needed reforming. In fact, it didn't need reforming, but having the technology, having televisions in everyone's homes was incompatible with democracy. That was a realization he had. So he wrote this whole book about it in 1978. And it is a totally different vibe and feel. It's not a dry academic type thing that we're reading with the Milner-Fabian conspiracy. It's a lot more accessible. There's more anecdotes and storytelling and biographical detail about his life. So that's the book club. We also have the Screenaholics Anonymous meetings. These are just hanging out. We just hang out for an hour, talk to each other, get to know each other. It's not recorded, no pressure, easy going. And then also you get to go into the classroom where you can watch my book review of Trapped in the Web by A.N. Turner. I'm going to be adding more book reviews to this section as we go along. That's just me talking for an hour about the book. And also in the classroom are the replays of the book club meetings. And there's chapter 1, Belly of the Beast. So you can catch up. That was an hour and 25 minutes long. So plenty more community, plenty more content, lots of community, and yeah, get involved. Get to know the other people who are interested in books. What could go wrong? Cool. I'm going to wrap it up and leave it there. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday night. Very glad to everyone who is hanging out on the live stream, and awesome if you check on the replay as well, because I know not everyone has 3 hours on a Friday night to go through some dry academic textbook like this. But we're nerds and we like to do it, so we did it right. Gwen just asks, are we going to do One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich? Are you asking that because you've seen it in the background here? Is there? This is a short book. I think we could get through this one pretty quickly. Yeah, we could definitely get through this one quickly. I haven't actually thought about the next book to do on the channel yet. Maybe we should do this one because Nigel Watson did shout me out and recommend it, so it would be a good one to do. Maybe he'll show up for the reading of that and contribute a little to our chat and understanding. I also really want to do this Doherty and McGregor book. I have permission from the author, the author's daughter. In fact, I've been in touch. I want to do this one and the follow-up book, which is about how Britain extended the war by 3 weeks. That's here. It's called Prolonging the Agony, how the Anglo-American establishment deliberately extended World War I by 3.5 years. Sorry, not 3.5 weeks. I just said weeks. I really want to get those two on the record, but that's a lot of pages. That's going to take quite a while to get through both of those, but we'll see. Maybe we do a short one that's a little more snappy and a bit easier to get through next, rather than a big, massive 400-pager again. It's probably a good idea, actually, Gwen, so I'll give it some thought. Cool. All right. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy your weekend. And I'll be back on Tuesday to finish off this chapter. It's taken us it's going to have taken us 9 hours of streaming to get through this chapter, but we are going to finish it on Tuesday. Right? We are. That is my promise. No matter what. Cool. Enjoy. Have a wonderful weekend. Find a space for beauty and doing what you love and doing what you are passionate about. And I'll see you on Tuesday. All right? God bless.